get started here in a moment. We have a long agenda this afternoon, so I didn't think it would hurt to start a minute or two earlier. Curator Stewart, your committee with a exceptionally long list of tasks for us.
Of course. Well, I'm glad you got started early, Chairman Good. Today we have 2 information items and 3 action items for the Academic Student Affairs Committee. The first information item will be a presentation on the e-learning the Executive Vice President Foley will lead, and then introduce you to e-learning leaders in the University of Missouri who have provided update from their campuses. The second information item will be a brief review of the fall and enrollment report. Our first action item today is the approval of the PhD in explosive engineer at Missouri S&T, and the second is approval of the amendment to the collected rules and regulations. With that brief introduction, Hank, you're on.
Thank you, Curator Stewart. Appreciate it. We're going to give you a brief overview today of where we are in e-learning across the system, and I have a number of colleagues here who I'll introduce in a moment. But first, I want to just motivate this with some brief discussion of e-learning. Let's begin with definitional information. You know, a few years ago, it would have been hard to get a definition, an official definition of e-learning, but the field is progressing nicely now, nicely enough across academia, that even the major dictionaries have begun to articulate a precise meaning for it. So it's usually learning conducted via electronic media, typically on the internet, use of electronic media and information and communication technologies in education. Cambridge has one that makes me chuckle a little bit, learning done by studying at home on computers. I've not seen that one before, and it's the outlier. But by and large, what we're talking about now is anything and everything that enhances the learning experience and benefits it that includes technology. That means then we've got a spectrum, and the spectrum looks something like this, from how much of any course is online, and you can see that we have some courses now that are fully online. We have a great number of courses that are in this middle category that are partially online, that are blended, hybrid, include the flipped classroom, and quite a few courses here that are starting out along this curve that are web-enabled. And of course, at this end of the spectrum, we have the traditional lecture, and there are very, very few of those traditional lectures anywhere in the university at this time. If we do just a quick snapshot of 12 and 13, where we really started to get registrars involved, faculty involved in labeling their courses properly and the like, what you could see is that in 12, we had 22,151 students who were taking at least one fully online course. That has jumped to 27, almost 28,000 in 13. The percent of students who are taking at least one online course has gone from about 26% to 32% at the University of Missouri system. The national average is 32%, so we're at the national average. And you can see that from those 2 years, we've seen already in years where we have good numbers, a 21% growth in students taking these courses. If we combine fully online courses and blended courses in the next 2 columns, fully online the year ago was about 120,000, blended 62,000. These are student credit hours, the percent of e-learning student credit hours, adding those up, dividing by the total number of student credit hours was 11%. That's our baseline number. We've gone up to 155,000 or so this year, fully online credit hours, and about 74 to 75,000 in blended courses, so we're up to 13%. In both cases, we've seen good, steady growth, and I think that will continue. However, the $64,000 question is, what does the growth look like and where does it maximize? And what I could say for sure is it's not parabolic. We're not going to have something that goes up and comes down. Again, this is here to stay. I think we're seeing growth that's probably much faster than linear. Is it all the way up to the logistic possibility? Maybe. But if it is, then we're going to see even more growth in the next few years, and that's our hope. If I look back at my own career, I was one of those guys who in the early 1990s was literally taking computers into the classroom, standing in studio classrooms, recording classes, and so forth. And so I could say for sure, pretty much for sure, in 1985, there were 0 courses that had any online component. I just didn't see any. Now, maybe that's not absolutely correct, but I think it is. So in this chart, this is just a parity plot, and what I've got here is the percent of a course content online. Keep in mind these two charts are just notional, and against the total fraction of courses between 0 and 1. So in 85, no courses were online. Someday, it's possible that if we were to hit this line, every course would be 100% online. Where are we now? We're probably somewhere in this region. Here's the parity plot. If we were to hit this cut line on the parity plot, this would be the 50-50 line. At this point, we'd have 50% of all courses that were 50% or more online. My guess is right now, total e-learning makes up probably a third to maybe even half of what we're doing across the university. I'm looking forward to getting really good numbers on this as we go through the next few years, and really mapping this out and comparing us quite consistently to other universities around the country. In that regard, if you look in your book, we've also included comparative data for UMSL, UMKC, S&T, and MU against their peer groups. And the peer group numbers are looking quite good. So you see MU especially up at the top of their peer group, and you see each of the others also doing very well. That should really be all that surprising to us, because if you look at the strategic plans, and I know Tim will be talking more about the strategic plans later in the meeting, you'll see that this is deeply embedded in everyone's strategic plans. And so what we'd like to do right now actually is have the folks who are doing this work, leading these things, tell you a bit about what's going on each of their campuses. So to begin, we'll start in the west, since we're in the east, with Dr. Devin Kinsella from UMKC. We'll go south to S&T and hear from Dr. Henry Wiebe. We'll come to UMSL with Dr. Judith Walker DeFelix, and then we'll end up with Dr. Jim Spain from MU. So with that, I'd like to turn this over now to Devin. Devin?
Well, thank you, and I'd like to thank the board for having me here to give the presentation about the exciting things that are going on at UMKC. With that, I'd like to kind of get going and reinforce some of the things that you've already heard. I think it is important to understand what an online class is, because it can be very many different things for different people depending on the resources that you choose to use. And I think it's important to understand that these can go all the way from the traditional class, which is the traditional faculty member in a classroom where there's basically nothing online, all the way down to fully online, where almost everything, if not everything, is completely done online. And the really nice thing about the online environment is it's not just a student sitting in front of its computer or his or her computer. In fact, it's students learning with telephones, with iPads, with the different kinds of mobile devices. So I think it's a very exciting time in higher ed to be able to look at these kinds of ways that students can learn. That being said, it's not a no-cost effort. If you go down the left-hand column here, what you see is going from traditional down to fully online. And what I did is I just highlighted a couple of issues that go along. And if you look at students, faculty, administrators, and services, or the kinds of experience that students have, it's important in designing the program that you build at your campus to understand what you're going to be doing. So, for example, a fully online program that may have a national impact will certainly have to deal with things like state accreditations, multiple national accreditations. If you're having a local focus, it's a little bit different. The types of students you attract are completely different. So, for example, an online audience may never come to your campus and would need services that are associated with that kind of campus that are different than the kinds of services that a student or a campus-based student would receive. What I wanted to do was at least show you an idea, and you got to imagine that this is an online course right here that most students would see. And in the real world, this could be done on your phone or on your iPad, but what I decided to do is show you the computer version of it. And really, it's just a web page, and the web page has a number of resources to it. And what you'll recognize is that not only are we providing content for the courses, we're also trying to provide a community of students in that. And within that, what I'd like to show you is that in the middle area, the central part of it is usually where the content of a course resides. This is where the lectures would be, the videos, assessments, quizzes, these kinds of things that most people associate with a course. Around that course, what we begin to see is the attempt to build community. So, for example, this is a GIS course, and this one is trying to show students that there's actually access to the GIS community outside of the university itself. The students also need access to kinds of resources. So, for example, a GIS course has very specific GIS software that's associated with the use of that course. And so a student that's online needs to access that software remotely or on the cloud, unlike a student who's traditionally campus-bound, who may be able to go to a computer center to be able to do that. The other thing that's really most important, I think, is that students need the ability to get help. So just like a student on a regular face-to-face campus may have trouble writing, students in the online world also have difficulties sometimes in the academic arena. And so, for example, things like tutoring, things like math, things like these kinds of services. And finally, what we see is that the idea to build community. How do you build a community within this? What I want to show you is that, in fact, as was said, we have a very strong emphasis on e-learning within our strategic plan, and it is part of that. It does meet our mission statement. We are going to focus on UMKC, the region, and working with the community within the region, the business community, to try and build online programs. That being said, UMKC is a little bit behind in some of the other campuses. If you look at this curve, this represents all of the students currently online. The middle one, the middle circle, represents students that have taken one course online at least per semester. And you can see the national average was 32. We're roughly at 26. But I think that the other thing is that we have a lot of potential for growth at UMKC. And you can see that we have right now a very limited number of programs online, but we are certainly going to be growing those programs. This chart represents the total number of programs and then the percent that are courses that are online. So with that, what I'd like to do is do say that we are working on a long-term development of our online programs. We are going to be focused on a regional impact within the region as well as with UMKC. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Henry Wiebe, who is my colleague from S&T.
Hank, you mentioned that you didn't see anything in 1985. We had a course under development at that time, and by the end of the year had actually launched our first 100% online course. So we've been in the business a long time. You can see on the screen we're focused on a strategic plan that emphasizes enhancing student learning and increasing faculty productivity. Those are the two drivers. And we have a blended online campus thrust and a second thrust of programs for working professionals. And both of those, we strive for cooperative programs, and that addresses the productivity element that we work so hard at. The 19 graduate degrees that are off campus serve a variety of corporations, and we've been very successful at that. The working professional in today's environment needs to continue to bring their skills up to date, and that's the service we provide. The blended online courses, we've got currently 18 of the 19 departments. The 19th is just about to come on stream, so that means we have 100% participation across the board. And in this effort, our grades, and this is the student learning component, have actually improved or stayed constant. Nowhere in the spectrum have they declined. And the instructional efficiency is greatly improved. We're able to handle larger number of students with the same faculty effort, and I think we're pretty proud of that. We have 56 courses providing over 3,000 credit hours, and in a relatively small institution, that's a significant impact. I've got examples of 3 courses up there. A large chemistry course, a mechanics and materials, which is a very difficult engineering course, and then a history course. My colleague Jeff Schramm is in the audience, and if we have detailed questions, he has an exceptional example he can show on that. In these 3 cases, none of the grades have declined. They've all improved. or stayed constant. An interesting aspect of the chemistry course is that it's structured so the students can select either 100% face-to-face, 100% online, or a blended class between recitation and the lecture, where they can choose either one of those as the online component and the other as the face-to-face. The cooperative effort, and you can see it reaches across the spectrum. It just so happens in the top part of your screen we have a doctoral student graduating out of the cooperative physics program with UMSL, this, just as we're standing here this semester, and we're proud of that. You can see the other cooperative efforts that exist. We have 2 bachelor's programs in electrical engineering and civil engineering with Missouri State University in Springfield, and we're actually reaching outside the country. We have a cooperative master's degree with King Saud University in Saudi Arabia, and Missouri S&T is part of the APLU consortium, looking very hard at personalized learning. There are 24 institutions. We are one of 18 that have been selected as a sustaining member, and that is going to have some national impact. The financial return on the last 2 slides. You can see the revenue is growing. We have about $1 million total GO support in this effort. Roughly half of that, a little less than half of that, goes toward the online programs. And you can see on the chart a significant amount goes back to the campus, both to the provost and the chancellor and to the departments. This final slide represents a new initiative in non-credit training for companies. It's barely started, but we anticipate significant growth here, reaching out again in the education area and also creating a revenue stream. I'm ready now to turn this over to Judith. And it's the button on the right.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Get this down where I can talk. I'm very pleased. We've been working so much on our strategic plan. I'm very pleased that we can talk to you today about how e-learning fits with that strategic plan. You saw this earlier at lunch. The 20% is a very bold, some say scary, goal. And if we're going to attain that, we're going to need to grow online at least 10% each year. He said it was top. Okay. We have achieved that target, but the issue now is how are we going to maintain that growth? Here are some of our tactics. First, we must uphold the University of Missouri brand. That means quality courses and also online services, such as our new online readiness self-assessment. Second, we need new products. We've thought about 8-week schedules and courses that we convert to mobile learning. We also will seek new markets. One source are the 400,000 adults in this region who have some college but no degree. Specifically, we're recruiting nurses with an RN who need the BSN degree, and workers in the correctional facilities in the Potosi area, and law enforcement personnel in St. Louis interested in criminology. This map shows where our current students live if they're taking only online courses. And it illustrates 2 points important for our online growth. First, national research shows that adult students prefer online programs within 100 miles from home. That's true currently at UMSL, and that will be our marketing target in the near term. Second, the green dots are graduate and red are undergraduate students. Currently, 95% of our online students are undergraduates, so we will focus on new undergraduate enrollments. The next slide addresses faculty engagement, which is necessary for online growth. Our consultants report that UMSL's major challenge to online growth is a viable departmental incentive plan. One incentive is providing faculty with evidence that they can teach online at the same demanding level as they do face-to-face and with the same academic integrity standards. Dr. Hubner has resolved both of those issues while also incorporating the quality factors that Devin mentioned before. First, her challenging interactive assignments and peer learning require critical thinking, which is what sets research universities apart. To prevent imposters and plagiarism, Beth requires students to provide a great deal of personal information, as you can see in the screenshot. It's really hard for an imposter to maintain that persona throughout the whole term. Then when the students write and rewrite papers in groups, it's more difficult to plagiarize. Now you can see here what students said about the course. Not only did they acknowledge that they learned a lot, they seemed surprised that they became better writers. That's typical in online classes with lots of feedback, since much of the communication is in writing. Students noted their responsibility to meet assignment deadlines and keep up with the coursework. This isn't like an old correspondence course. Many mentioned the convenience of not having to drive to campus, and you've probably experienced that yourself, and also to be able to do their assignments around their work and family duties. That's important to busy UMSL students. You'll see how we're working to extend the UMSL experience from the strategic plan beyond the course in this slide. As Devin mentioned, online students need access to support services such as our new online course orientation that teaches students how to use all the tools in the online courses. And this screenshot shows you our online writing center. A student has created a figure to represent herself, an avatar, and she enters the center. The tutor asks her whether she wants to go to the teleport station to set up an in-person appointment or have a virtual tutorial. So this slide shows what happens if she selects the online tutorial. What we're most excited about, though, is our future. During the strategic planning process, we received proposals for several cutting-edge but expensive digital programs. So we looked for collaborators. A corporate partner donated $500,000 because he wants to hire graduates with multidisciplinary perspectives and expertise in technology. We plan to meet that challenge with an interdisciplinary digital think tank or innovative learning lab for faculty and students to collaborate to solve community problems and then create related apps and other digital products. Such partnerships draw on UMSL's strategic advantage of the community involvement that you heard about at lunch and also the metropolitan area. We believe that it will broaden the definition of e-learning at UMSL as student teams, rather than faculty alone, create digital learning environments. We think this is very exciting. So now Jim will talk about Mizzou.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. I'm Jim Spain, Vice Provost for Undergraduate Studies at Mizzou, and it's my pleasure to try to bring you up to speed on 100 years' worth of history. Mizzou did our first correspondence course out of 123 Jesse Hall over 100 years ago. But I'm not going to bore you with 100 years' worth of history. I'd much rather talk about where we're at right now and where we plan to go. And as this slide indicates, we are very much focused on how e-learning fits our strategic plan as it relates to recruiting students, and in particular our non-distant students, using investments in technology, and that we're going to increase our online course offerings that meets demands and actually brings in new net students, students that we can't access. More specifically, we've described or captured our e-learning goals as using technology to improve student learning. Online, on campus, every time we use technology, it needs to be designed to improve student learning outcomes. Nothing flashy unless it's functional. Using technology to improve capacity so students can have access. As you know, we've experienced some significant growth in enrollment, which puts some enrollment pressures on us, especially in some lab courses. How can we use technology to make sure students can get into the courses that they need to make academic progress towards their degree? The third goal certainly is, as indicated, making Mizzou available and accessible to students across the state, across the country, and indeed around the world. We've got students in 42 different countries enrolled in distance education programs. We have students enrolled in all 50 states in online courses and programs. We have students in all 114 counties taking online courses through Mizzou. And then finally, we can't ask our faculty to be successful in this new teaching environment unless we help prepare them, and likewise our students, helping them to be learners in that new environment. So first off, a quick snapshot of what's happening on campus. 70% of our courses are supported through online. Most of that's learning management systems. For us, it would be Blackboard. Almost 100% of our students are taking at least one course every semester that's web facilitated, and our learning management system course receives course views of over 200 million annually. 200 million annual visits to a course site. Now, there's an economic value there, and I'm actually meeting with one of our econ faculty to see how we might be able to make that a source of revenue for us. Collaboration, technology tools allowing students and faculty to interact outside of classroom. We've made an investment of $500,000 in course redesigns, and that's affecting over 13,000 students that enroll in those courses every academic year. And these are large enrollment courses, so these are the courses that have 300, 400, 500 students in them. How can we improve the learning experience in those large enrollment course settings? And then finally, our faculty are the ones that are doing this work. I can stand and talk to you about it, but they're the ones that are doing it. And we're fortunate. We've had 3 faculty in the last 3 years win national awards, and Dr. Betsy Baker and Dr. Bethany Stone won Boyer Awards, and MU is the only university in the country to win that award twice, the other one being the Naval Academy. We're proud to be in that company, and we anticipate to continue this progress. On campus, these are some example courses. This picture here is provided by Dr. Stone, who was on the previous slide. This is a 500-student biology lecture. And notice there's no lecturing. If you were to walk into this classroom in Conservation Auditorium, you and I would think it's chaos based on what we typically expect. But she pushes content online, and then she goes in, and those kids work together, and she coaches them from the front of the room. She doesn't lecture to them from the front of the room. And these kids are really engaged in learning biology, which again is the intent of our efforts. On an online distance education programs, in 2000 we had 11 online degree programs. These are degree programs students can take without coming to Boone County. In 2012, 2013, we're at 70, and this includes graduate, undergraduate degrees, our certificate programs, our educational specialist programs. We anticipate in the next 2 to 3 years that number is going to top 100 online degree programs. We are at over 12,000 students, 24,000 enrollments, and 71,000 credit hours in 12. That's a 30% increase or greater in all 3 of those categories compared to 2011, 2012. 24% of our students are in online degree programs. Most of those are at the graduate level, 712 undergraduates, and like Judith and UMSL, we're trying to look to how can we expand our portfolio of undergraduate programs. But again, students in all 50 states, or I guess, David, it's 49 states and Kansas is the way we put that at Mizzou, right? And then, yeah, that's a Mizzou joke. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. One of the things that's interesting, and I think will be a challenge for all of our efforts across higher education, is the spread of availability of internet accessibility. And one of the things we've done to try to address that is last month we signed a memorandum of cooperation with all of the community colleges in the state that if a student completes an associate's degree at a community college in the state of Missouri, they're now allowed to use the computer lab at that community college at no cost to take online degree programs through Mizzou. And we're excited about that opportunity and the support it provides. We've grown to over $17 million in revenue. We're pushing most of that back to the department, the incentive for the academic programs to grow. This is some examples of some things that we've got online. These are things are in queue to come online. These are programs that are under development, including positive coaching, which right now, if you're tracking what's happening in the world of sports, Dr. Rick McGuire, former track coach and former team psychologist for the U.S. Olympic track team, is leading that effort. In the next 4 years, we plan to invest $10 million. That's $10 million out of reserve accounts from Mizzou Online, and this program is entirely fee-driven and fee-based with no geo investment. That, ladies and gentlemen, is one online, on campus, one Mizzou. And it doesn't matter where that student is sitting. It's all about making sure we maximize the quality of the educational program they're accessing and earning from MU. Dr. Foley?
Let me ask a couple of questions before you finish.
Yes, sir.
And you can give fairly quick answers, particularly the first one. What percentage of your online students are enrolled on campus in other courses, and what percent are
That's
otherwise?
a great question, Curator Good. 74% of the students who are taking online courses from us are sitting on our campus. Okay? 76% are MU students, 24% are actually in distance education programs that are not taking the courses on our campus.
Okay, as a follow-up,
Yes, sir.
when I was at Mizzou many years ago, there were several big, important lecture courses. One of them was Econ 51, one was American History.
You bet.
Most students took those. The quality of the lectures were good. I mean, people learned a lot. How is a course like that now taught online? Well, let's take Econ 51.
Sure. We can use lecture capture to capture some of that lecture. We can push out other instructional videos, not limited to instructional videos that we produce. We can pull e-content in, and we package that, make that available online. And so let's take Bethany Stone's course in biology. She's delivering content that your professor in econ, when he told you, read the book before you come to class, okay, and then you got to class and he told you what you just read in the book. Pretty much, right?
Yeah,
and,
some degree.
And well, you were supposed to read the book,
Yeah.
right? And that's been the challenge, and that's, we think, the benefit of packaging the content in a way that's more engaging online content, so that when the students come to class, instead of us re-lecturing to them, we can take it to deeper questioning and deeper thinking or critical thinking. We can begin to apply those biological concepts to real-world problems, helping the students understand why that theory is relevant to them, even if they're not a biology major.
Well, okay, in econ,
Yes, sir.
does the student still have whatever number of econ books that we used to go to the bookstore and buy?
Yes, sir.
They have those. They need to read that to progress. And then online, they can source a lecture
Yes,
if they
sir.
want to, or they can source outlines.
Other content material. For example, I teach a class right now Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I've got 180 kids in that class. When I go into class, I put a microphone on my jacket, and I record my lecture with the PowerPoints as I roll. Now, if that student is not there, and tomorrow morning it may be a little tricky about them being there, when they get bored at home with Thanksgiving, they can log on and they can watch my lecture. I push the homework. Okay, so if they misplace a homework, I can put a study guide, and they can, but maybe they were there and they didn't really understand what Dr. Spain meant by, they can go back to that lecture, just grab that particular point, and catch back up with what we've got going on.
In that case, it's a classroom class.
I've got it.
But you can also take it online or a combination of the two.
Yes, sir. That's right.
Okay.
Yes, sir. You know, some of our students will take it online versus taking it at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Jim, why don't you come
Yep,
join us
will.
down here?
Okay.
Chairman
Thank
Good,
you.
what I thought we'd do is just go through a brief SWOT analysis of where we are on this for the board and then answer any other questions you might have. And we also have Jeff Schramm here who could actually give you a demo of some of the things they're doing at S&T with his course. And I think, with your permission, we have time to do that because we did start a little early. So, Jeff, do you want to give us 2 minutes on, because I think that could help answer some of the questions these folks have.
Many of the questions you were just asking are things that I do in my course. So hopefully this will work well for you.
And this is a history course. It's not mechanics, so just the material will be very relevant, I think. Thank you. No time.
As the computer is waking up here, I do have a question, though, for the curators and everyone else in this room. How many of you in your home today have a formal dining room? Raise your hand. Formal dining room. How often do you use it? Weekly?
Next week.
Monthly?
Next week. Yearly.
Thanksgiving and Christmas?
Yeah.
That tells us something about our architecture, about our homes. If we can devote one room as a formal dining room that we use a handful of times a year. That's the first question I ask my students when they come in for this course, which is History 375, called Architecture, Technology, and Society. And it's a blended course. It's a hybrid course. It's also a flipped course. It is not a fully online course. We meet once a week instead of twice a week or 3 times a week. And most of my lecture is delivered online via short little video clips. And then when they do come to class, we engage in discussion and things like we just did. And I'll show you a little bit here if you like. Whoa, what's going on? Here we go. I have it organized by week. There's different topics under each week. We'll go to week 7 just as an example here. I still have a book. It tells them what their readings are by chapter. I make little videos, and nothing longer than about 15 minutes because attention spans aren't really that great anymore. I'll show you one of these. I've already pulled one up. And I think we might
in this video, we're actually going to get down to the architecture of the Bauhaus itself and the Bauhaus movement in its early years in the 1920s. I urge you to go to this site. This is the official German site.
I'm going to skip ahead.
They do have English translation movement and their sort of architecture.
There's some pretty pictures.
But if they're going to build their own building, let's make it look like what they want it to look like. Okay, it doesn't look that remarkable to you. You're like, hey, Dr. Schramm, looks like every other school or building I've seen ever since. Well, that's why. This is the first one that really looks like this. Change the colors a little bit. Would it look at home on this campus? Maybe. You can even see here. You could see the internal structure, the internal concrete, and then the glass curtain wall that covers this whole.
It's kind of interesting to me being in this building. I see Bauhaus elements in this building. I see 1920s Germany in this room. And that's what this lecture is about. This little video here, as you can see down here, they're all closed caption. Students have reported to me they really enjoy the closed captioning. They can read along. One student said she really loved watching them once and taking notes, and then she would play it in the background while she was getting ready in the morning and eating breakfast, and just listening to it reinforced the lessons, and then when she did come to class that day, she had it kind of fresh in her mind. So, I'll show you some of the other assignments and stuff if you'd like to see. One thing that teaching online allows you to do is to bring in all sorts of other resources. There's so much out there. So here's some links to other little videos about the Bauhaus, including some of the official Bauhaus sites. How do I know that they're getting all this? They take a quiz every week online. It's automatically graded. The questions, even 2 students sitting right side by side in the same computer lab are not getting the same questions in the same order. And frankly, if they are working together, that's fine with me. I want them to understand it. I do make them write papers. I'm a historian. They have to write papers for me. Under the assignments tab, we also do a day trip to St. Louis where we get into some of the buildings downtown, and then we do a tour down on Cherokee Street in the afternoon, which is a great sort of urban neighborhood. Their group project is not a final research paper or anything like that. They make a video as a group, which gets submitted via Blackboard online. They also do some peer grading of that. You can see down here, here's where they would turn that in. They get up here. Here's where the rubric is, their test review sheets. I can show you their first paper that they write. I kept all these as Word documents. That way, if they wanted to, they could print these all out. They don't have to be right on the internet when they're working on this. They can print this out, take this with them, take this somewhere that's offline. So here's your paper assignment. Choose a residential structure you're familiar with. It could be a house that they live in, maybe their fraternity or sorority, maybe the house they grew up in, something like that. Research a little bit of the history of it, when it was built, any historical significance of it, and then tell me what you consider the architecture shows about it. Start to get them to do some thinking, some analysis. If their house has a formal dining room, what does that show about their family? Does their family value the experience of getting together as a family at holidays to have that sort of experience? They were willing enough to pay extra. Most houses, or a lot of houses, don't have formal dining rooms. They were going to pay extra to get a formal dining room because they value that family experience and put it in their house. So that's some of the things that I get them to do.
Jeff, thank you. We appreciate it. What I'd like to do is get the lights back on, if I can, and then would you have questions? Are there things you'd like to ask the panel while we have them up here? These are our experts.
I want to ask, I heard about the cooperation with the community colleges, which is great. Are we doing anything with the regional universities in the state there? I think there's 10 of them.
Well, I think, Henry, you could address that with Missouri State.
That physics course that I spoke about is sent to all universities in the state within the campus system and all the other four-year institutions. In 2011, there were 6 institutions participating, 3 of the system campuses and 3 of the regionals. So that is alive and well. It's under the Missouri Alliance for Cooperative Education program that was introduced by Governor Nixon in 2010.
So I'll get credit for that at my school where I go. If I'm at Southeast Missouri State University, I'll get credit for it there.
That's what gives you the credit, and that's where you enroll for the course.
How is the revenue shared under that situation?
The revenue stays at the institution where the student enrolls. Part of the rules that govern that cooperative arrangement say that no cash flow goes between the different universities. It all stays at the home institution of the student.
So in the case of community colleges, people are paying community colleges fees and accessing University of Missouri courses.
That particular program is for the four-year institutions. So that one would not go out to the community colleges.
Okay. Does that type of sharing work out? Is everybody happy on both ends of it?
In that program, it has worked. And it's worked very well because there's reciprocity. Some of the other institutions will have their own courses that are taken elsewhere by the students that may be in the original home institution.
That's a pretty important factor in that tuition becomes a larger and larger part of our revenue. Not here, most everywhere. So how that works, I think, is very important going forward.
There could be other arrangements made, and I'm sure that will take place and evolve over time.
Hank, at some point, I'd like you to reflect on that, the revenue issue.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I think right now it's pretty nascent, and I think the goodwill generated politically by doing this is probably more than offsetting any revenue loss we might have or suffer. In fact, I don't think we really have a revenue loss. Maybe we have a revenue that we haven't fully attained. But I think over time, Mr. Chairman, that will work itself out. But right now, I think the goodwill that we get from the state for doing this and showing leadership in the state is really a great benefit for the university. But we will work on that, I assure you.
Is there any availability to high school students for advanced placement classes, such as, you know, there's probably in my area 1 out of 5 high schools offers physics. I mean, is there opportunity that seniors can take these classes online?
Jim? Yeah.
We have a fully accredited high school at MU that's fully online that offers the very types of courses that you're describing, the advanced placement courses that, you know, if I'm in a small school district and I don't have enough students in physics to take an AP, I can take that AP course online through an accredited high school. It's the MU high school, and it's part of our virtual school that we actually moved out of Mizzou Online to the College of Education so that it can become part of the teacher training that our College of Education is providing our students, because we know that future educators are going to be teaching in that environment more and more, and they need to have that as part of their preparation for being successful in that career.
Does anyone know about this?
Woo! I tell you what, we invest, and again, they're also a self-sufficient, self-supporting unit, and I do know that we make efforts to make investments in advertising and to work with the school districts, because we don't want to be seen as competing with the school districts and what we're providing their students. And but I do know that we work closely, and Zach March, who's now the director of that program, is working very hard to strengthen the relationships with the school boards and the school superintendents so that we can make that more available, more accessible, and certainly much more visible.
Curator Cups, I think he said yes.
Professor Spain, you're obviously a great teacher, because we've just seen a demonstration of it, but we know that takes a lot of time and effort to prepare, and perhaps not every professor is as good as you are and may be threatened by putting this online. What incentives do we have to encourage that or give those professors time for research or other opportunities to compensate for the extra effort that it requires to go toward e-learning? And the second question is, to what extent are we incentivizing campuses so that you're each kind of doing your own thing with some cooperation, but some campuses are ahead of others, so do we have incentives built in to guide the faculty toward that?
Sure. Well, and thank you. I don't know that my students in the morning at 9 o'clock would necessarily agree that what kind of instructor Jim Spain is, but 65% of the revenue generated by distance online students go back to the academic department. We'd like to get that number to 75%. As we grow and we become more efficient, we spread our cost over more students. We want to send more of that back. Mizzou Online is designed to just facilitate that and then capture enough money that we can reinvest in that development. To the next part of your question, how do we provide faculty with time? Well, that $10 million, $2.5 million per year, last year 2.5, this year 2.5 the next 2 years, is invested in proposals that actually buy faculty summer salaries, for example, to allow them the time to develop the courses or translate their in-seat class to a hybrid class, to a flipped classroom, or to a fully online classroom. So what do we do to help them get there? Several years ago, and Gary, was it 3 years ago, 4 years ago, through a very deliberative conversation with our faculty across campus, we asked, what do you need? And they told us, we need expertise. And so we take money that's generated by our academic technology fee, money that we charge every student for every hour, and we've invested in academic technology liaisons. Now, this is an idea that really addresses faculty needs, and we've put these educational technologists in the schools and colleges so that they can work directly with faculty. E-mentors, which was an idea that Dr. Graham developed at the system, we've taken that and we've implemented on our on-campus to put faculty like Bethany Stone. We want her to be available and accessible for her colleagues. Now, that's also something that we're sharing across campuses. Bethany Stone goes to other campuses to share her expertise. So we're sharing expertise in that way. We've got to grow this local, and then as we grow that local and it becomes developed, I think the synergies and the collaborations will grow out of that because we're developing those relationships as this thing sort of matures and grows. Did I get to your questions?
Yes, thank you.
Mike, I think.
And so go ahead, Don. Dr. Spain or anybody on the panel, I've heard here today anecdotally that the students find these useful. Certainly the numbers are trending that way. What I'd like to know is, are we making any concerted or cohesive effort to collect data on what the students find useful and beneficial about the classes, and then how are we then implementing that data in what we put out?
Yes, we certainly are. I did that with my course, and I can show you statistics that my students did, at least on some areas of exam questions, did better after I blended the course than before. Almost all of our faculty that have been engaged in this, and some of them over years, since 2009, 2010, have substantial statistics. And Henry alluded to these earlier, that we can show with numbers that we either have improved learning outcomes or actually, in all cases, they're improved.
Devin,
every major course I can think of has improved.
And
Devin, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree that my experience has been that you know, students actually learn better. I guess the one caution I would give people is that, you know, I mean, a bad online course, if it's not thought out and designed well, is just like a bad face-to-face course. So you know, some of the things that we were talking about earlier, like with this mentoring and the, you know, how do you teach better, I think that's a really important part of building an online or an e-presence. And so I do think that it's a very powerful learning tool, and if done properly, you get great advances.
And all courses, online or on campus, go through the same course evaluation process at the end of the semester for student feedback. And right now, we're in the process of actually doing a pretty deep analysis, big data analytics, if you will, comparing student success rates across that continuum. We're getting enough courses now with enough data that, because our faculty some of them are hesitant because they're not confident. Does this really work? Mm-hmm. Our faculty do not want to move online if they think it sacrifices the student learning that that's their highest priority, right? So what we have to do is help provide evidence to our faculty that if done well, that this delivery mechanism can be as successful or more successful than what you may be using right now. And we have a responsibility to the students and to their families when they bring their kids to us to make sure that the things that we're doing works the way it's supposed to work. And so every semester we're gathering feedback, but we think at this point in Mizzou's kind of evolution, we're going to do a deep analysis to provide our faculty with the question or answers, the data that they right now are asking us. Does this work as well as you say it does?
Did the students like it as well or better?
I could comment on that. I think somewhere around the late 1990s, early 2000, I don't know how many of my colleagues suddenly realized and came to the conclusion that this generation that was in school then was learning in a different way. Do you remember that? Sort of this dawned on all of us about 12, 13 years ago. And I think at this point, Curator Ponder, most of these kids probably like looking at the screen more than looking at us. And I was thinking you might just say something about the chemistry course, Henry, and then I might say something about efficiency.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Chem 1 course, which is a large
You need to
course.
pull that up closer.
The Chem 1 course, which is a large course that most of the students have to take, actually gives them a choice whether they want to learn fully face-to-face, fully online, or the course is split into lecture and recitation. They could take either one. 2/3 of them select some online component. A third select fully online. We've had some other courses where that same percentage breaks out. Years ago, we had a marketing class that gave them the same choice. A third selected the fully online, a third fully face-to-face, and a third came some of the time they didn't. So it depends on the learning style of the student. But a course can be structured so that it's not a bitter pill that they have to take. I guess that's the best way to take it.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
I was just going to quickly talk about grades. We look at the grade distribution of every faculty member at the end of every semester, and then we show the distribution to the chairs because we don't want too many A's or too many F's, and we certainly don't want students to fail. When we would take that in, one of the chairs said, "Oh, I know where those failures are. Those are in our online classes." So I said, "What are you going to do about it?" And they've really started gearing up, and because it is a matter of designing a good course. Students can learn, and in fact, they're always surprised that if they have a really fantastic online class, they'll say things like, "Well, I didn't think I'd like an online class." So it's all about whether it's a good course or not.
Do we have the capability to go back to Chairman Good's reference to Econ 51, which I also took many years ago on the Mizzou campus? If I were a student in southeastern Missouri and I didn't want to travel to Columbia, Missouri, for example, and wanted to major in economics, are we to the point yet where I can sit in my home in southeastern Missouri, take a full slew of online courses all the way through and get a degree in economics today?
We're not in a position with all of the degree programs. Right now, our undergraduate degree programs are fairly limited, and that's why the $2.5 million investment is designed to do, is to take us beyond the courses or the programs. We've got a growing list of programs, and our intent is to grow more of those programs. The challenge is to make sure that the programs we develop for online delivery have a strong enough market with a strong enough student interest that it's going to be financially sustainable. Now, I'm not sure an econ degree is going to attract enough students to make it, but can we package those into degrees that are relevant and are interesting and would bring the students in so that we have enough students in the degree programs to make them financially viable?
Out of our, I think our enrollment report said we have about 75,000 students on all of our campuses this next fall. That's the projection. Hank, do you know or have an approximation of how many of those 75,000 students are in online degree programs where basically they never have to set foot on our campus? And
Totally online?
Yes.
100% online?
Very few.
Are there any? Or do we?
For MU, and
10%?
We've got an enrollment report for you. It's not going to be quite 10% in our online.
I would say system-wide we're approaching 10%.
And do we have
UMKC has a number of programs that are.
Yeah.
Where do we project that going over the next 5 to 10 years?
That's going to just keep growing. That was what I was trying to say in that slide. I mean, it's not going to top out. It's going to grow. We just don't know how. Everything looks linear at first, but I think it's faster than linear, the growth rate.
We do have a project that I think that is totally online for, isn't it, the pediatric nurse practitioner?
Correct.
Yes.
That's kind of like a pilot. How has that gone, or is it too soon to tell? Is it popular enough, and is the learning quality such that we think that's a good example or not?
Jim, is that yours, or is that?
I don't think it's
Yeah, no, it's that one was a relatively new program, I believe.
We can't hear you, Devin.
Okay. But the nursing program itself has been online for probably just over 10 years. And I think that they've been very, very successful in drawing students from literally across the country. So I think that they do have a very good track record of, successfully having students complete the programs and go through that. And I think all of their certificate or their tracks that they have within there have also been very successful. So they go all the way from bachelor's up through a PhD or a DNP, and they've been very successful in those kinds of programs.
All totally online?
All totally
blended?
online.
Yes, sir. PhD in architectural studies totally online. So it's amazing what we can do.
And S&T has 17 master's degrees, totally online. Students from literally all over the world are enrolled in those and don't have to ever set foot on a campus.
You know, that what your question, Don, brings up the issue of what are we going to do with all these buildings someday? If we have everybody online and everybody on distance learnings, do we need all these big expensive buildings on these campuses that we're continuing to build?
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do. For what? They're going to be empty.
Actually, Curator Bradley, the students who come to our campus for the on-campus still expect that human interaction in the classroom. And in fact, we get pushback if all we do is put a course online and that's their only option. Because the kids that come to Columbia, they expect to interact with the world-class faculty that helps us draw them to our campus. And so they don't want to know us just virtually. They want to interact with us in the classroom.
We even see that at the master's level online. 80-20 is about the right mix. 80 online, 20% face-to-face. So I think we'll need the buildings for a while. But, you know, one of the other cool things about the Chem 1 course at S&T that impressed me is very inexpensive technology, very easy to use. Faculty can get over the hump quickly. And I've been told there used to be 6 faculty on that course. There are now 2, which means those other 4 faculty could go do other things, create new courses, do other research, outreach, what have you. So we get efficiencies that I think are also pretty cool.
I hope the answer to David's question is that we're going to grow our on-campus enrollment and our fully online enrollment. I hope that's the answer. But and I was going to, in that vein, on online enrollment for degrees that are fully online, do we make a cost differential? Do we charge less for people who are fully online? Are we considering that? Is that reasonable or not? Where's the market headed? Where's the market headed in that, for that?
Do you want to say where you are on that right now? This is a hot topic right now.
So
actually.
We're actually going to propose, right now, if you're out of state, you pay full out-of-state tuition online or on campus. If you're in-state, online or on campus, in-state tuition. What we've recognized through a pretty thorough market analysis is at the $728 per credit hour out of state, we've priced ourselves out of the market. And so our market analysis would suggest that we need to drop our online out-of-state tuition to $350 per credit hour, which is going to make us very competitive within the region and across peer institutions like us, because we've seen some loss in interest. It's too early for us to tell what's going to be the true impact with enrollments. But we think we need to go back and relook at that strategy to maintain our competitive position in the market. You know, and our goal is a nationwide presence, both at the graduate as well as the undergraduate level.
We should be watching in the peer group, Florida, Penn State, and Purdue, schools like that to see if they're able to maintain the full cost of a credit hour online. It's a really good question, Curator Downing. None of us can really predict where the market will go in the future. There could be a differential, but I don't see it yet. So far, people are getting the same cost, the same price that they charge on campus, except for this issue here with out-of-state, in-state. So we've got to keep an eye on that. It's very important.
What's the threat or opportunity from mocks put on by some of the high-ranking universities when they start to commercialize some of those programs and start charging and get credit hours for that? Is there a way for us to compete in that kind of a market when that happens?
Yeah, I think so. The business model still hasn't been worked out for Coursera or for edX. So, you know, if they're willing to underwrite from other sources of income that they have, and some of the schools have enormous endowments so they could do that, then they could keep right on going. But at some point, if it's going to become at least cost neutral Then they've got to work out how you do the credit, and they've got to work out how you would actually collect tuition, how you would do all of those things. We've got to watch that as well. Do I think we can participate in MOOCs? Yeah, I think we can. I think we've got some areas, in select areas, where we could put on a MOOC that would probably be worth doing. But worth doing in the sense of what Sam Walton would have called a loss leader, in the sense that it's, right now, you know, I know a school that's putting on MOOCs. They say it's costing $250,000 to do it. They're working with Coursera. We know behind the scenes it's probably costing $400,000 to $500,000 to put it on. So it's a true loss leader. They'll make no money off of it.
I have a thought about this. When you're talking about pricing issues like that, are you considering in all that dilution of our brand, how significant our important our brand is?
Yes.
And you know, I just want to get a feel from you guys how you're considering that in the overall look at the online courses.
Well, and one of the, I guess one of the, can we differentiate within programs? So the higher demand programs, we charge a higher price point for because of the recognized value of that particular, not just the Mizzou brand, but the degree program within the Mizzou brand. Do we differentiate that price point? That's something we're actually watching very, very closely across the system, because we recognize that there needs to be some level of consistency and coordination in how we price across the system as well.
Missouri S&T looks very hard at that question. Our courses are priced in the top third of the country. We compete against the Stanfords, the Michigans, Wisconsins, and we've done very well because we try very, very hard to produce a quality product. It has continually grown, and we market to the working professional, many of them in major corporations. And if you deliver a quality product to them and they perceive a value in it, they will pay the price. And I think the key is in the quality of what we deliver.
If I could respond just very quickly to the MOOC question from Curator Phillips, there's a report out that was in the Chronicle of Higher Education this morning from the University of Pennsylvania, which is a partner of Coursera. 80% of the students taking courses already have a degree. And selling them another undergraduate course is not going to be financially feasible. And so this MOOC thing is still very, very, very unstable. In fact, Udacity, which was one of the early leaders, just kind of changed their whole business model. And they're leaving the higher education and going to the professional development, industrial, professional training direction. So the MOOC is a very volatile environment at present.
They
We've got
haven't
a
figured
signal
out
from
how
our
to...
chairman that we probably need to cut off
Yeah.
here because in sense of time.
Let me ask one more question. And sure. And then going to the...
Yes, sir.
Well, I know, but this
Chairman's prerogative.
is kind of on the economics of this. There's 10% of the students that never come onto campus taking these courses, but they're enrolled through one of the campuses. And then there's another number of students that are enrolled through a community college or another unaffiliated campus somewhere, I assume state campus, but not always. And then the third question is the next piece of it, is there people who aren't enrolled anywhere that are able to access these courses either by, I assume they're not supposed to be able to, but are there those that have the capacity to do that?
So the first part of your question was the students who are enrolled in our system who take courses at our campuses, they pay full freight. Right. I think the number of students who are not enrolled, who are enrolled at community colleges, taking a course that might have been produced is de minimis. I think the number is next to nothing.
Okay.
So let's not worry about that one. The third one is for those students who are out there, or people who are out there who might want to poke in and poke around and see what we've got. You know, I haven't done the experiment, but if you put in Econ 1 or Intro to Econ in Google, you'll get a plethora of websites from schools all around the country where a faculty member has put their stuff up and Google finds it. So it'd be hard for me to absolutely answer your question, but there's no way that they could do anything more than look at it, read it, digest it. There's no way for them to actualize that.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, you have one more information piece, and then...
Well, if you don't have any more questions.
Well, I do,
Oh,
but
you
I'll
don't want to on the bus anymore. I'm good.
I'll try to set an
Curator
example
Stewart.
by not asking anymore.
Curator Stewart, may I release the hostages? Thank you.
That was really interesting.
Should I go up? Yeah. Or do it right from here? Oh, okay. The fall enrollment report.
Come a long way through. We're doing one big course from MU.
Right, so I was asked to give you an update on fall enrollment, and in your books you'll find lots of content on fall enrollment and the like. So what I plan to do here is just give you a very brief overview of growth at the University of Missouri system. We took a 10-year look at this from 2003 to 2013. Headcount enrollment over that period of time grew by 13,000 students, which is about a 21% increase. FTE enrollment, which you know is a little different, grew from 45,000, almost 46,000, to 58,000. You can see where the growth occurred. MU increased by 32.5%, UMKC by 22.6%, S&T by 47.5%, and UMSL by 9.5%. So in aggregate, that works out to about a 27.3% increase in students enrolled. These are the UM system cumulative undergraduate FTE enrollment growth charts. Again, same kind of information that you've just seen. The numbers are looking strong, particularly at the MU campus, and rising rapidly also at S&T. We also keep track of graduate enrollment because graduate is core to the mission. Graduate education is core to the mission, and you can see again that our numbers are strong and getting stronger across the board. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have and refer you back to information in the book.
Think we're good? Any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Are we at capacity now on any of our campuses?
I would say, do I dare answer this? No, don't answer it. I would say that we're approaching capacity, if not at it, at S&T. I would have to turn to our colleagues at MU for an answer at MU, but if I know from their strategic plan says that they will continue to grow. And I think that number is up to 38,000. I think that's FTE rather than headcount. Yes?
I would just like to clarify about S&T. There are some programs that are nearing capacity, and we actually are improving enrollments in those areas where there is capacity. So we're shaping our enrollment growth in a way that allows us to continue to expand programs where there's opportunity. But at this point, we have not capped any programs.
I can also just say that the campuses are using every trick that they can use in terms of having more classes at night, no more lunch hour or breaks. There are also some lab constraints, so we're doing everything that we can to increase the utilization of the existing capacity, but we are running out of tricks. That's in a lot of the programs, and if we don't expand the capacity, it's going to be a real struggle to take on more students in certain programs.
Okay, thank you very much. Should we
We'll move on to the action items of the doctorate in explosives and engineering at Missouri and S&T.
Right, so I'd like to ask for board approval for the PhD in explosives engineering at Missouri S&T. Just briefly, there's quite a bit of information in your book on this. This has been very thoroughly vetted as a program. It will be the only PhD in explosives engineering currently in North America. S&T is the #1 university in the country for explosives engineering at the undergraduate level. It also has a very strong program at the master's degree level. The focus on explosive engineering has been instrumental to increasing enrollment in the mining engineering department, and they even have an explosives camp for high school students that has brought national attention from places as far and wide as the Learning Channel and the New York Times. This PhD program will build on each of those programs and on really the 100-year history of mining and mining engineering at S&T. So I'd like to ask for your consideration.
Okay. Any questions? You've read the material, committee. Any thoughts or questions at this point? Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Then moved and seconded. Call the roll.
Curator Bradley?
Yes.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Ponder?
Aye.
Curator Stewart?
Aye.
Okay. All committee votes in favor.
I'll move that to the full board.
You're making a motion.
I'm making the motion.
Second.
Okay, if there's any questions before the board, I would say this. If anyone took the time to read everything that was put in the book on explosives, you almost are ready for a degree, I think. Very, very well presented, very thoroughly. Is there any discussion? If not, Cindy, would you please call the roll?
Curator Bradley?
Yes.
Curator Covington? Yes. Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Downing?
Yes.
Curator Good?
Aye.
Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Ponder?
Aye.
Curator Stewart?
Aye.
Okay. All votes in favor.
Thank you. Motion carries.
The second is approval of the amendment to the collective rules and regulations.
Yes, I'd like to ask for your consideration of amendment of collected rules and regulations number 450.020, overall plan for operation of UMKC Medical School, and 450.030, affiliation agreements. At the September board meeting, Chancellor Morton presented to the group the recommended changes related to the structure of the School of Medicine at the University of Missouri-Kansas City. The objective of the proposed policy changes are: 1, update the rules to reflect developments in the operation of UMKC Medical School since 1971. Number 2, allow UMKC greater flexibility in obtaining teaching services, including the ability to employ a greater number of physician teachers directly or jointly with affiliated providers. Number 3, to allow the dean of the UMKC Medical School to identify institutions for primary affiliation agreements and purchased teaching time agreements as deemed necessary for the operation of the medical school. The benefits of the proposed changes are that the updates to the medical school rules will be more consistent with general rules in place for the operation of other medical schools. It should allow for further flexibility to adapt to a changing healthcare marketplace and teaching environment. And thirdly, it may allow UMKC Medical School to partner with community providers in new and unique ways.
Okay. It's
And
before the
what page in the online book does this material start on?
I would have to turn to the secretary for that. I don't have a verbatim copy of yours, but mine says page 404.
It starts on 156, 156. Yep.
Any other questions, concerns? Okay, it's been recommended by Chancellor Morton and endorsed by President Wolf. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Any second? Okay. Roll, please.
Okay. Curator Bradley?
Yes.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Ponder?
Aye.
Curator Stewart?
Aye.
Okay. All committee votes in favor.
I so move to the full board.
Second.
Motion's been made and second. Any further discussion by the board? Call the roll, please.
Curator Bradley?
Yes.
Curator Covington? Yes. Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Downey?
Yes.
Curator Good?
Aye.
Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Ponder?
Aye.
Curator Stewart?
Aye.
Okay. All votes in favor.
Motion carries.
All right.
Curator Stewart, I have nothing further to bring before the committee today.
Thank you. Great job. All right. Mr. Chairman, that ends our meeting. Committee?
Are you moving to adjourn?
Yes.
I think that's a motion that you make, that someone on your
okay.
committee makes
Can
to
I
you,
get-
and you.
Can I get a motion to end
Second.
the meeting?
Move to adjourn.
Okay.
Curator Bradley?
Yes.
Curator Covington? Yes. Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Ponder?
Aye.
And Curator Stewart?
I have a privately held company, okay? Doesn't apply with this.
Okay, thank you.
When you get up, it's
Item
over.
is the Governance Committee, Curator Bradley.
Yes, okay, our committee's been a little dormant the last few meetings, but we're glad to be active again. Every 3 or 4 years, I think we do an update of our master plan, and today we have our Chancellor from University of Missouri St. Louis, Tom George. He's going to give us an update on the UMSL campus master plan. And just a couple of the highlights. I'm not going to steal the show, but from what I've heard is it's more emphasis on renovation of existing assets and more discussion of what to do of the, I think of the BAFA housing area. I think that's what the name of it is. And also a pretty exciting redevelopment of the entry experience for the UMSL as well. So, Tom, why don't you give us an update?
Okay, Curator Bradley, thank you very much, and welcome everyone to the campus of the University of Missouri St. Louis, and thank you all for participating in our very exciting groundbreaking that we had just before we convened for this open session meeting. We have handouts for you, and I thought you would all have them at this stage. You don't need it to hear my presentation, but our master plan is actually contained in an executive summary, and it's like this. And you'll each get one of these. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go through this, large map, if you will. And when you do get them, I can show you how you should open up and look at it. Our plan is done every 3 to 4 years. It's been 4 years since we've had an update of the plan. We do use an outside consultant. It's Sasaki. I believe at Columbia uses Sasaki as well. They're located in Boston. We've been using them for quite some time, and they know our campus as well as anyone knows our campus. And we use them again for this update of the master plan. The master plan dovetails with the strategic plan, and I'd say the overarching plan is the strategic plan, and then the master plan supports that particular plan. We have 3 themes for our strategic plan. One is the academic enhancement, another is the UMSL experience, and the third is community partnerships. And what I want to do as I go through this update of the master plan is demonstrate how this dovetails well, meshes with our strategic plan. We have strategic plan and master plan goals. And along with the master plan, when we did the update 4 years ago, we also added a sustainability component, and we're continuing that. Our consultant, Sasaki, says that just about every campus now, when they do master planning, has a sustainability component, and certainly, we're no exception. Let me just make a few comments about the strategic plan integration. I'm doing it by themes, our 3 themes, and of course, under each theme, we have levers and then action items. Under the UMSL experience, which says we're going to enhance the campus identity as a public metropolitan university, we're looking at overall campus system improvements, landscape enhancements. I wish it weren't raining today because you'd probably get a better sense of how beautiful this campus really looks. But we look beautiful in the rain as well. North Academic and Student Life District, and I can eventually show you pictures of all of this, including the new Recreation and Wellness Center, which will be adjacent to this building, and then also additional on-campus housing. Just for a point of fact, we have about 1,400 beds on campus, even though we have a student enrollment of close to 17,000, including the high school students taking our courses. Our goal probably over the long term is to get up to about 2,500 beds on campus, and so we're moving our way in that direction. Community partnerships, advancing our reputation as an anchor institution in St. Louis. Master plan initiatives include an expansion of our business technology and research park, which is located on the north part of campus just before you get to Route 70. Improvements along Natural Bridge Road. Community outreach, which includes the projection of a new clinic building for optometry. I'll talk more about that later. And then a framework to evaluate our sites outside the campus boundaries. While we have 350 acres immediately right here, all contiguous at this point in time, we do have a lot of locations elsewhere as we expand. One good example is our Grand Center building located in Grand Center. And then, of course, academic enhancement, increasing degree completion, and you've seen several times our strategy statement of 20% increase in the number of graduates over the next 5 years. I'll mention a few things like learning studios, building renovations, particularly in our science complex, and our new science building, which I'll mention as well. So the master plan goals, I'm not going to go through every single one of these, and you have this when you did receive this document that I'm presenting to you now. But we want to create a campus, continue creating a campus that reflects UMSL's mission and our vision. We want to enhance the quality of the physical, academic, and student life environments on the campus. And, I thought the comments beforehand on the online experience were great. We intend to increase online offerings and increase student enrollment and increase our facilities and make the facilities better. Identify strategies and a physical framework that alleviates existing constrained facilities. And certainly our recreation and wellness centers are a great example of that because we were crammed into the Mark Twain building with intercollegiate athletics, and now we can expand that. We want to respond to the higher education needs of the state of Missouri. And we also want to address the need to reduce operational costs. The sustainability goals include things like pursuing LEED certification for new buildings, and certainly this new science learning building that we're calling it, which is a new building between our science complex and Natural Bridge Road, will have LEED certification. The Express Scripts buildings on campus that were built several years ago have LEED certification. We want to design for energy efficiency and conservation, reuse existing structures when practical, and when not practical, take them down. And that's what we do. We've been taking down buildings when they're just simply not practical to maintain. Manage materials for a healthy earth, enhance water resources, champion the environment. And I should say, throughout our curriculum, we've got a lot of sustainability in our curriculum. It's in all areas, and probably almost every college has aspects of sustainability in the curriculum. So it's not simply the way we practice on the campus, but it's actually the way we engage in our student learning. Let me now look at academic enhancement. This is one of our 3 themes of strategic planning. I'm going to look at building renovations, learning studios, and then look at our priority capital projects. Our building renovations, our planned renovations from 2015 moving to 2019 include the Benton-Stadler Science Building. Benton-Stadler Complex is the oldest academic complex on the campus. We were founded in 1963, and actually, while we're the youngest university in the system, we're the oldest in terms of buildings. Part of it is because a lot was built in the first 5 to 10 years of the campus. We've also inherited a number of buildings, inherited them from the Catholic Church, and great in the outside, having some challenges on the inside. The Benton Science Stadler Complex is Benton, Stadler, and Research. So it's really 3 buildings together, houses the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry, Physics and Astronomy, and Biology, and also Psychology. And then the Social Sciences and Business Building Tower, Clark Hall, Seton Hall Center, that's over in the South Campus, and the JCPenney Conference Center. And again, this is looking outward from now. We're 2013. This is looking outward as far as 2019. And then we have a number of planned renovations as we go from 2020 to 2024. I'm not going to spend time on that now because that is out there a ways, but just to let you know that we have plans and we're looking ahead as buildings age and as they need renovations. The academic environment enhancement, learning studios is something we've experimented with since 2007. They've been highly successful. Learning studios have enhanced technology, large screen displays and controls, wireless laptops, carts, flexible furniture. It kind of is a hybrid of technology with face-to-face contact, and we find that the learning experience is enhanced with students in the learning studios, and we would like to place more learning studios throughout the campus. And so that's one of our plans, and that certainly dovetails well with academic environment enhancement. In terms of capital projects, well, one project now, when we broke ground for it on the rug here earlier today, but that is our Wellness and Recreation Center. That's a $36 million facility that's funded by student fees, and that's going to have an elevated running track, swimming pool, basketball courts, juice bar, all these neat things. That certainly enhances by far the campus experience for the students. The next is the Benton Stadler Science Learning Building. That's a new building being built. We've actually just broken ground for that. It's located between Natural Bridge Road, which cuts right through the center of campus, and the Science Complex. As we're creating that space so that we can then move teaching labs out from the current Benton Stadler complex into this new space and then rehab those labs. That rehab of those labs, that's a second phase of this overall project. That's a $60 million project. This initial new building is a $30 million project. We're funding that out of our own hide. We're identifying resources from our operating budget, and we're going to spend $2 million a year for the next 30 years to make this happen. And then the Business College Administration building, the College of Business Administration is scattered around campus in about 6 different locations. We've been able to raise $17 million toward a new building for business administration. Nearly $10 million of that is actually cash in our pocket. Another $7 million is deferred gifts and things of this sort. We're ever hopeful that we can tap into the Higher Education Capital Construction Fund, used to be Senate Bill 655 that Tim Green introduced, that got passed, to get matching for that $10 million. The overall business complex we estimate to be somewhere between $40 and $45 million. If we can do that first $20 million chunk, if you will, that would be 2 of 4 phases for that. Most likely, I'm going to be coming back to ask permission for us to get started on that, whether we get the state matching or not. This is not a major bonding issue. We're talking about funding this right up front, but certainly our donors who have come forward with large gifts for the first $17 million want to see a shovel in the ground at some stage. So sometime during the next year, we'll be coming back to you on that. I'm going to come back to you in the next session in the Finance Committee with a proposed idea. It's not for action, but simply information on the optometry nursing complex to build right along Natural Bridge Road. We actually owned at one point in time an osteopathic hospital. It wasn't a functioning osteopathic hospital. It was an osteopathic hospital. That's one of those buildings that was inefficient. We tore it down, and we have now empty space waiting for good stuff, particularly in the health sciences that we would have with respect to our own teaching facilities and then other entities that could come in, and I'll talk more about that later. Our College of Fine Arts and Communication facilities has a dream and a plan eventually to build out around the Two Hill Performing Arts Center and our current Arts Administration building to bring us all contiguous in what we're doing there. We don't have funding immediately for that, but this is part of our overall master plan. So I've got a figure of all the projects, and I think, do we have these now? Can we hand these out, Cindy? Yes, and I'll just, because it might be easier to look at, opening it up to look at this. So this is the handout. If you open it up, you get actually a full picture of the campus with all of our campus buildings and projected buildings as well. And proposed projects are in orange, and we've got proposed recreation athletic fields and so forth. And so open it up like that to get the overall view of the campus. And I would say this is something you can look at later. We have to study it now. But if you were then to fold it up and open it up like this, we have key master plan initiatives according to our various themes. We have capital projects, community outreach, I'll be getting into shortly on this presentation. There is one frame here on the legacy of UMSL. It gives us a sense of going from 1963 all the way out now to the 2000s. And then another frame here talking about the master plan goals and the sustainability goals. So pretty much everything I'm telling you now is contained in this one document. But I mean, again, you don't have to really study it right now because I'm going to be giving it all to you. But looking at all our projects, probably one of our highest priorities and one of our direst needs is simply M&R, maintenance and repair. I mean, for the system, we've got issues that go up to, I think, Tom Richards, $1.3 billion, something of that order. We approach $300 million on our campus, and we're certainly looking for creative ways of addressing maintenance and repair. The Science Learning Building is a major step in that direction of how we address that particular issue. Recreation and Wellness Center as well, because we're straining at Mark Twain Building in athletic facilities, and that's why we need the Wellness and Recreation Center, and certainly Business Administration. My proposal later to you on optometry and nursing. We've got another dream. We don't have the dollars at this point, but at the Thomas Jefferson Mercantile Library, we would like to expand the Mercantile Library, and we have some donations for that now. We've got some architectural drawings. We're looking for that first lead gift. We haven't turned that over yet, but if we can land that first lead gift, then maybe we can do the expansion for the Mercantile Library. Mercantile Library used to be downtown and then moved about, I don't know, it was 15 years plus to this campus here. College of Education has a dream for a new building as well on the North Campus. That's somewhere off in the future. We need a new campus entrance right where Express Scripts is. Nothing money won't buy, and that would eventually be like a key entrance, if you will, to the campus. And then some more garage structures, student housing, and so forth. So let me go through some of these in detail. I'm going to start with the UMSL experience now as our theme of the strategic plan. I want to talk about campus districts, open space structure, pedestrian circulation, vehicular circulation and parking, and then the master plan vision and updates. The campus districts, if we want to think of them as districts, and that's what Sasaki helped us come up with, the Business Technology and Research Park is our northmost part of the campus. It's on the North Campus, and it's just under Route 70. That's got the big anchor tenant. That's Express Scripts, and certainly it's very robust with them as a tenant. We would like to expand that. It's about 30 contiguous acres. We own about 60 acres, not all contiguous. Our overall plan in the long term is probably about 100 acres. We're looking for another good tenant like Express Scripts, and we're very picky and we're very choosy. We're not simply going to put a warehouse there, which would make us money, but we want an engaged partner like we have with Express Scripts. The Gateway District, which contains the Mark Twain Building, and then the North Academic and Student Life District, a lot of our academic classes, particularly in humanities and social sciences, then expanding down to the Science Complex, the Academic Core District. The Bethel Special Use District is on the far right. It's that blue patch there. It's what separates us between that and the campus is the Normandy School District, and we have envisioned that for more housing. And if you go south of Natural Bridge Road, you get into what we call the Professional Schools District. That's education, optometry, nursing, and then the Honors College. The Honors College is not a professional school, but the Honors College. And then South Campus residential living. Right now, our residential living is focused on the South Campus, except for Mansion Hills, an apartment complex that's just on the other side of University Boulevard in the east section of the North Campus. We also worry a lot about open space, plazas, how buildings hug the road, and I've got a slide here that, and again, you have it in the original package that was sent to you, but we're looking at kind of a central valley that moves up through particularly the North Campus, and as we create new buildings like our Wellness and Recreation Center, we're going to be creating plazas and a sense of place for open space, and that's very important for us, that it's just not all buildings here, and certainly we can do that with 350 acres on this campus. Pedestrian circulation, we worry about that. We've been building new trails on the campus, and they connect the campus to other trail systems. And we encourage pedestrians to use those. Maybe not as much in a day like today, but we certainly encourage them to use that. And we've been able to get investments from Green Rivers, Trailways, the other organizations that actually have invested on this campus to build these trails. So not all of these are state funds that are going into this. Vehicular circulation, we've got some main roads that circulate around campus. What we'd like to do eventually is, when you want to go from the south campus to the north campus, you actually have to go out onto roads. And for example, when I want to go work out at the gymnasium, the Mark Twain building, I should walk, but I don't. I take my car. And when I do that, I have to go out onto University Boulevard, then come back in. We're eventually going to have it that you don't have to go out onto the University Boulevard. You can make all your connections internally within the campus. Looking at the North Academic District and the Student Life District, we're going to be examining service parking. This provides access from main drives. Our buildings, as we build them, looking at the way that they hug the street. We're looking, as I mentioned earlier, more informal green space. We want to have a new entry plaza that enhances the Millennium Student Center right here and its connections to the Recreation Wellness Center. All this will happen within the next 2 years as we build this Wellness Recreation Center. Looking at the BEFA site. The BEFA site, you have to go out to Natural Bridge Road, go past the Normandy School District, the middle school on the elementary school, make a left, and there's a series of buildings there that we've actually, we own that whole area, and we eventually will probably turn this into what we call housing for a mixture, perhaps students, faculty, a mixture of that kind of housing. We don't have a road that cuts right to the campus, but that's part of our plan, is to put a road that cuts right to the campus for that. And again, we want to continue to look at vehicular circulation, pedestrian circulation, capitalize on the 2 metro stops we have on campus. We've got one on the south campus, and we've got one on the north campus. I'm not sure how many universities in the country have 2 metro stops on a campus. The south campus, with our professional schools, we do need future buildings and garages. Normandy Hall is located on that site. That's probably going to be decommissioned and torn down. It borders an Incarnate Word Academy, which is a private school for women, Catholic school for women. And we also need a new substation on the south campus that we're planning for. In terms of community partnerships, do want to talk about our Natural Bridge redevelopment and just other aspects related to community partnerships. The Business Technology and Research Park. What you see there at the top is currently as it exists with Express Scripts. Express Scripts has 2 building and parking garages there. They've also spilled over Route 70 into North Park. In a way, I like to think of our Business Technology and Research Park as the first anchor for North Park. And North Park is almost 600 acres, connects our area of the university all the way to the airport. Very exciting development taking place in North County. We own about 80% of Mansion Hill to the right of that. So that's on the other side of University Boulevard. We'd like to eventually own all of that. When we can own all of that, we'll probably tear it down. The buildings are all right, but they're not great. And that could be our site then for future expansion of the Business Technology Research Park. The reason we'd like to do that in particular ahead of time before we get a partner is when we landed Express Scripts, we had to do an awful lot of work. And I had to probably go begging and breaking all sorts of rules with the Board of Curators and with our system to get that done. We don't want to do that again. When we start looking for new tenants, we want to have some space that's ready-made that they can move right into that kind of space. So that's what our eye is on Mansion Hill for the expansion of the Business Technology and Research Park. And future partnerships also, we own splotches of land to the left. You'll see that big kind of gray-orange area to the left of the Business Technology Research Park. We will opportunistically buy more. There's some very inexpensive houses there. We're also encouraging private developers to work there. We've had developers talk about the potential of a conference site there or a new hotel, and we certainly do encourage developers and partner with them, just like you did with the Grand Center building, that houses our radio station and other academic components. Natural Bridge Road used to be the only way you could come west to east. When you came from Columbia and then you were going to go down to St. Louis, and then Route 70 got built. And so Natural Bridge Road is kind of like old Route 70, if you will, Business Route 70. It's got 4 lanes. Probably does not have enough traffic to support 4 lanes, except when we get class changes. And so for about 5 minutes in class changes, we've been able to partner with East-West Gateway Council and also the Missouri Department of Transportation, which is investing $20 million over the next year and a half to fix up Natural Bridge Road, make it more pedestrian-friendly, make it more bicycle-friendly, make it more inviting for retail. We'd like to make it look a little more here like the Del Mar Loop or like Wydam, and I think over time that can indeed happen. And so we're going to be, again, starting that particular project this coming calendar year. So the $36 million Wellness Recreation Center, the $30 million new building for science, the $20 million complex, if you will, along Natural Bridge Road, the business building, which will be at least $10 million, we hope $20 million, and then I'll talk to you later about optometry. In terms of community outreach, that's another portion, another one of our themes. I'm not going to read all this to you, but you know that's something that we do particularly well here at the University of Missouri St. Louis. And it's not just the 350 acres here. It's as we expand, and we've kind of thinking of it as zones. You know, we've got an adjacent zone right around the university, then, you know, a near zone. A near zone would be, for example, if you go across 70 to where Express Scripts has their second stage of buildings. A mid zone, you know, something like maybe, 10 miles away, that could be like Grand Center, where we have a building there. And then going even further, the far zone, we have a building at 270 in Manchester that we own, that we do computer science training, and Missouri S&T runs their master's degree program in engineering management out of that building as well. So we're trying to think in terms of zones as we, you very carefully look opportunistically for opportunities. This is the last slide I'll show you. And this is, with our community outreach, is maybe one of my favorite slides. It shows our footprint in the greater St. Louis region, the 16 county regions that is identified by the St. Louis Regional Chamber. Innovative Technology Enterprises is an incubator located about halfway between here and the airport. The Children's Advocacy Center, you heard about that at the lunch today. We have a building on campus that we serve students, and well, particularly youth that have experienced harassment, sexual harassment. We have a building at the Central West End, and we also just opened up one in Kirkwood. Cortex, which is located in the Central West End. We're a major player in that, and part of Cortex is the Center for Emerging Technologies. It's an incubator that we have been running for the last 10 years. We've just recently merged them into Cortex, probably the most successful incubator in the state easily. And then the College of Optometry, we have clinics right here. We also have a clinic in St. Louis. We have the mobile that drives around. UMSL at Grand Center. The Missouri Institute of Mental Health, we now run the Missouri Institute of Mental Health. And that's located, it's a building of about 100 employees. They bring upwards of $10 million of grants and contracts. And the building is actually operated by the Department of Mental Health. West County Computer Education Center at 270 in Manchester, that I mentioned earlier. You can get an UMSL degree at about 8 different locations in the greater St. Louis region without ever stepping foot on our campus. And places, an example of that is St. Charles Community College. We have offices there. Community College at Wildwood, that's St. Louis Community College at Wildwood. We're their exclusive partner with St. Louis Community College in Wildwood. Out in West County, we actually have faculty permanently located on that campus. East Central College, Jeffco, Mineral Area College. And certainly as we increase online offerings, I think we'll see even more of that in terms of the partnerships with the community colleges. And that, in a nutshell, is our master plan update. And thanks for listening.
Do you have questions for?
I like what you're doing with the outreach piece, and I know that you're heavily involved also, which is a centerpiece for St. Louis on outreach, and that's United Way. What is your collaboration and partnership with them? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, we do partner with United Way. I should say it's not just United Way. We partner with the YMCA. We partner with the Boy Scouts, and with United Way, we've got a major.
What I'm suggesting to you is that encompasses all those.
Oh yeah.
YMCA and
well, and as it turns out, the last 2 years, I've been the chair of the education component of the United Way campaign, so which is all of higher education and all of K through 12. And yes, it's a concerted effort. Let me mention the Boy Scouts, though, because you chaired the board recently. We actually created what's called STEM University, and we run STEM University between Christmas and New Year's right here on the campus. We had about 1,000 Boy Scouts and parents descend on the campus for several days of just great activities in terms of sciences, and that's an example. And then with the YMCA, we partner. And in the summer we have all sorts of programs that bring students onto the campus. We partner with Washington University because there's actually a YMCA branch there. But yeah, I mean, all of these we're great partners with the community on.
Any other questions?
How do you see your plans for expansion as a vehicle for improving community outreach? I mean, it's one thing to have programmatic outreach. It's another thing to build buildings and expand as a means of outreach. Is that?
Well, we look at where there's a need. I mean, for example, when St. Louis Community College decided to build another campus at Wildwood, we already have engaged in a lot of cooperative programs with them. We did testings of what did people want out in Wildwood, and they didn't want to make that half-hour drive either to our campus or to one of the other campuses at St. Louis Community College. So there was a needs assessment done, and we built together, trying to satisfy a need. With our location now at 270 in Manchester, which we eventually bought the building. We were just renting. We came to the Board of Curators about 5 years ago, and it was so successful and going gangbusters that we thought it was probably better just to go ahead and actually buy the building. Grand Center, we were approached. We were approached by the Arts District, Performing Arts District in Grand Center, and said, we need a UMSL presence there, and here's what it ought to entail, and we decided that's something we can do. So it's not arbitrary, and it's really not by happenstance. It's, we get approached by people that are partnering with us. I mean, the new building we have in Kirkwood for the Children's Advocacy Center, that we were approached by them about the need for having that located there. So, I mean, we really try to fill needs when we're doing this.
One of the things I have to say about Chancellor George, he walks the talk, he eats his own dog food, he leads by example. And so, I don't know, I guess that's a guy.
Doug, I have 2 cats. I mean, I guess I could eat their food.
He has hot sauce for his dog food. He's heavily engaged in the community as a community leader, and so hats off to you for all that you do.
Whenever I go, I see you there before me.
Do we have any specific building we're bringing before the legislature this year?
No. Well, first of all, the Wellness Recreation Center is done.
Okay.
And the science complex is done. The single building we are, I hope, I mean, it's gone through the board here, going through CBHE, is the business building. Because what we'd like to do is get that match. We'd like to get a $10 million match. We're not talking about bonding. This is not bonding. This is simply getting that match, a one-time match, and we'll build it. I mean, that'll be the first 2 phases of a 4-phase. So the answer to your question is yes, this year we do. The governor, from what I understand, will not be including it in his budget, but that's okay. I mean, we've gotten a number of things in the past that weren't included in the gubernatorial budget, but we're now talking carefully to various legislators. I've got community leaders and particularly industry leaders talking with the permission of the system to various legislators that hopefully this will happen. And Rick Stream, who in terms of he's our alum, when the House budget goes forward, it's going to have it in the House budget.
Okay.
I think part of the answer to that, though, Tom, is that Benton-Stadler is the university's highest priority going to the legislature. Now, the legislature hasn't done much in capital in a long time, and that's why the campus decided a couple years ago to build the new piece that's under construction with bonds funded from local campus funds. So everything was moved out of there, and then the legislature ever gets around to a bond issue or whatever they do, then can rebuild the existing Benton-Stadler, because it's in a very structurally sound building, but it's got laboratories that are 50 years old and a lot of other things. So that's.
But your point, Wayne, I'm glad you mentioned that, because the second phase, which is totally renovation, totally M&R, if there were ever a bond issue with the state, and I don't know what's going to happen over this next year, that's a top priority. It's for us, and I think it's a very high, if not top priority for the system as well. I'm not sure that's going to happen in the immediate future.
Okay. Any more questions? If not, we'd like to get an approval of the campus plan update. Can we get a motion to that effect? Okay.
Somebody
from your committee.
Who's on my committee? Okay. Pam, you're on my
I'll
committee.
second.
Okay. Wait a minute. David, you're not on my committee. You can't move it.
I think I am.
Yeah, John Phillips can.
I can second it.
Okay. Okay.
I try.
Okay.
All right, Curator Bradley?
Yes.
Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Okay,
Now we'd like a motion for the full board for approval of the master plan update.
Second to that.
Okay.
Call the roll, Cindy, please.
Curator Bradley?
Yes?
Curator Covington? Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Downing?
Yes.
Curator Good?
Yes.
Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Ponder?
Aye.
Curator Stewart?
Aye.
All votes in favor.
Motion passes.
I think that's, we need to
You need a
adjourn.
motion to adjourn the committee.
We need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay. For a second.
Second.
Cindy?
Okay. Curator Bradley?
Yes.
Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, Curator Downing, the Finance Committee, and I think it's a little shorter than we've had in the past couple of meetings.
Manageable.
Manageable.
We have 3 information items and 2 action items, Mr. Chairman, today. First information item is going to require Chancellor George to get back up at the podium and talk about the optometry clinic project. He's going to review that with us. This, again, is an information item for today. Will be, as I understand it, presented to the board for approval in our January meeting. Tom?
Curator Downing, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about an idea that we're simply sounding out with you, and this is not an action item at this point. We offer the only Doctor of Optometry program in the Missouri. We're one of 21 colleges of optometry. The quality of our optometry students, our faculty, our programs are second to none, but we got a problem. And the problem is we're in a facility that really wasn't designed to be a college of optometry. It was designed to be a residence halls for nuns, and that's what it was used for. We then inherited that building, and we've been using it in a very creative fashion as a college of optometry. Earlier this year, Dean Larry Davis, who's here in the audience, took me and President Tim Wolf to the University of Houston to show us what a real college of optometry set of facilities can look like. And he took us to the Cadillac of facilities, and we were blown away. I think you were blown away, Mr. President. So at least we have an idea of what you really can have in terms of facilities. But I want to emphasize that our programs, our faculty, and our students are second to none. Up until several years ago, we had some sticker price at our College of Optometry. We tended to have among the highest tuition in the country. We have not had increases in our tuition for years. I mean, we kept that down, and we're now somewhere in the middle of the pack. And also, relative to the other colleges of optometry, we probably put more into scholarships than the other ones do. Our long-term vision and dream is to have a new building for optometry located on Natural Bridge Road, right where the osteopathic hospital was that we tore down, very visible for people to see. The price tag, if we were able to do the whole thing, is $90 million. Now, we don't have $90 million, but that's the overall price tag. We're going to sectionalize this, propose it as phases, and we're actually calling it an optometry nursing complex. And we would also move sections of nursing into that as well. I'd like to propose to you the first phase here. The overall square footage of this building would be about 250,000 square feet, and we're thinking for the first phase of something a bit under 50,000 square feet. We're talking about 35,000 square feet, which would be for clinical space for patients, clinical space for our students that have to do clinical training. So this is both educational and outreach to the community. We'd like to carve out maybe about 13,000 square feet that's not assigned, but space that could be then utilized for other things like, let's say, an urgent care center. Much needed in this area of North County. We've already been talking to some hospitals about partnering with something like this. We've also been talking to UMKC about a potential branch of the dental school that could be located in that space. In terms of most of the parts of that space, it would be rental space so that we could bring in more dollars, if you will, in revenue. The price tag we have for phase one is $17 million. Now, the College of Optometry is our only college that keeps its own tuition. We've got an arrangement with them, and they've been able to save explicitly for this purpose. And they have saved $5 million to put forth to this new phase one building of $17 million. That knocks the price now down to $12 million. Now, how do we propose to fund the $12 million? Well, we're proposing to do a bonding issue. And the bonding issue would have several components. One component, a little less than half of it, would come from an increased student fee. And the students have overwhelmingly voted for this themselves to have an increased fee. It would be about, once we ratchet it up, it would get to $900 a semester or $1,800 for the academic year. It's not as high as some of our other fees. We've got a fee in nursing that's higher. We've got our engineering program with Washington University has a higher fee than that. That's the student fee that they voted for, and actually, interestingly, we did not allow the fourth-year students to vote because they wouldn't be paying the fee. The students that voted for the fee is those that would have to actually pay the fee, and of course, future students as well. Then we're looking at the other half, and we're looking at not filling two positions. One is a faculty position, the other is a faculty/more administrative position, and then cutting back a bit on our scholarships. We still are more generous in our scholarships than our peers, and we're more than 20% of our tuition going into scholarships, which is sort of the magic number. So those are our, I guess, call it three components that we would do in terms of trying to fund this building. In terms of operating costs for the building, we would have to find those somehow. We're prepared to identify those in terms of the operating costs. It would, you know, we probably will come back and look for some strategic planning funding for that. If we get that, great. But if not, we're still prepared to handle the operating costs. So that's the creative proposal. It would be a $17 million facility located right there on Natural Bridge Road. It'd be something visible, something that I think would help attract more partnerships, particularly from other healthcare units that are in the region and other entities like UMKC, dental, and so forth. And I do have here, in case there's a really complicated question, I've got Dean Larry Davis here. I've got some students here from optometry that helped sell this concept to us. And we did meet with Curator Don Downing in his office and, you know, reviewed this with you, I think, a week or two ago as well. So.
The Chancellor, with all due respect to you and the good dean, the students were the most persuasive on this.
I'm no dummy. You bring the students. They did the sell.
But I will make the point. I mean, it's very persuasive to me that the students, after a lot of consideration, put this up to a vote, and an overwhelming percentage, somewhere in the 70s, as I recall.
It was near 80%, I think, of the students voted for it.
We're for this, and I asked questions of the students in my office as to why you're willing to do this, why is this so important to you? And I don't know if any of the students today would like to stand up in this group, but to paraphrase some of the answers, this is their professional school. They're going to value their professional reputations through the rest of their careers, and they want to be associated with a physical structure and a school that's well respected, and part of that, obviously, we all know, is a physical appearance of the building. They want it to be impressive, not only to current students, but also to future generations of students. So it was very persuasive to me. I will say this, and I know other curators may have an interest in expressing views on this. You know, this is a fairly unique, if not the first time, that we're financing in part the construction of really an academic building, in large part through an increase in student fees. And I'm not suggesting that's necessarily something we shouldn't do, but I think we all need to understand that this is a new thing, and there may be some concerns that we have about that. The other concern that I expressed to you, Chancellor, and the Dean, and the students when you were in my office is, you know, we continue to debt finance buildings, and at least in my mind, there's a limit to how far we can go in that direction while still maintaining our credit rating. And I feel strongly that we need to maintain our credit rating. We may not be quite there yet, but I think our underwriters would tell us that we're not too far away from there. So those are my issues, concerns, but I will say I was very impressed also with you, Dean, but particularly with your students.
How many years will the students have to pay this increased fee? Is that a 20-year deal?
Oh, 30, I think.
30 years.
30, yeah, 30.
If the school has control over tuition, why is it not a tuition issue as opposed to putting it in fees?
Well, we're identifying specifically what it's for. I mean, I guess one could simply propose a higher tuition. These are graduate students, they're not undergraduate students, so it's not subject to Senate Bill 389. So we could do that, and we have done that with our other tuition and fees, as the board knows. We've wrapped them all together, and we now have just one figure, which is tuition. But this identifies.
Is there a rationale for fees as opposed to tuition?
I can address that partially. We do have, as the Chancellor said, we do have
This is Larry Davis, the Dean of Optometry.
Thank you. We do have the ability to request a higher tuition increase instead of this. But when I went to the students, I thought it was the right thing to do to get them to vote for it. And I wanted them to get involved because this is a really big thing for us.
Well, I think what you're saying then is that the students would vote on fees, but they wouldn't have voted on tuition.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yes.
Good. It's a good answer.
Hi, I'm Lori Thompson, and I am a second-year optometry student. And this is really important to us. It's important enough that though we're already looking at $160,000 for our four-year education, that we're willing to put that extra amount in. I would put our faculty and staff against any in the country. That is why we have the caliber of students we have here. If it was based on buildings, we would have no one here. But, and there's times, I'm heavily involved in our ambassador program, which we give tours to incoming applicants. And there's times when we're walking by and there's a hole in the wall, you kind of want to stand in front of it while everybody walks by. But our staff is amazing. People come here because of our staff and because of our students. I'm not sure how much longer, though, we can cover up the holes in the walls. And we're a professional program. And you want to portray yourselves as professionals, but you also want the building to look like you're making an investment in your future. And right now, that's not what we have. So we went to the students. Dean Davis came to us and said, "What do you think?" And overwhelmingly, people said, "I think it's important enough." And there were some at the beginning that said, you get the sticker shock of, oh, more money, I'm already, paying. But it's important. It was important enough that we had an overwhelming percentage. We had 99% of our students vote in that vote. So it wasn't as though it was just the ones who wanted the building that came out and showed up to vote. I think we had one student in the entire College of Optometry that didn't vote. I don't know if they were sick that day or what was going on. But it was discussed heavily. It was presented. So everybody knew the ins and outs. Everybody knew exactly what they were voting for. There was nothing that was behind the scenes. But you have students from across the country that are looking towards their future, and we want to make an investment in our future. We want to make an investment in the College of Optometry at the University of Missouri St. Louis. So that's where we're from.
You understand why I thought the students were very persuasive. Any other concerns, questions, comments? Again, we're not. This is not up for approval today, but we need to have a good discussion today and flesh out any issues if there are issues.
What's the projected enrollment for the optometry school in the next 5 years?
That's a good question, Curator Ponder, and I posed that question to the dean as well. As we build this new clinical facility, at the same time we're going to fix up and enhance the spaces that are just teaching and research. The second phase of this overall building project would be teaching and research, but that's a ways off. And my understanding that we can stretch another 10% in our student numbers as we do that. So I guess there's a 10% projection increase along with this overall project. Related to that, we have some of the smallest class sizes of all the optometry colleges. I understand from the students this is one of the appeals. So, we're not out to try to get huge, but rather just selectively increase.
Chancellor, I have a question. I note that some of the space is for an adult and eye care clinic. Does that generate any revenue?
Yes, it does. It does. It's a mix. I mean, we're out as community citizens, so we do give care that's reduced rates or free, but that would be income. Also, we're talking about ambulatory surgery, as in this particular space that the president and I and the dean saw at University of Houston, where you can do things like cataract surgery. Our people that come out of our optometry college are not qualified to do cataract surgery, but we can now create a space where that can happen, and that would be revenue generating as well.
One of the points I made to the group that came to my office, the inquiries I made, is whether there might be some alumni donor support for this building, and both Chancellor George and the good dean pledged to make inquiry in that direction, but obviously they didn't have commitments they were willing to or able to trot out that day. But I would encourage you to continue to look for that, because you never know. I mean, donors these days, I mean, we have one of these on the agenda today. Some donors are willing to contribute a lot of money if they get their name on a building. So something to think about. Any other questions or concerns?
Can you explain the phasing a little more? You got $90 million.
We have $90 million. We're talking about the second two phases are each somewhere around 100,000 square feet. One's a little less, one's a little more. The second, this is the first phase of clinical patient care, and then other opportunities to bring in rental space like an urgent care center or something like that. The second is essentially all largely teaching and research. I don't have a price tag for that, but you know, how that divides between that and the third phase, bringing in nursing. But you know, we can probably split it down the middle of what's left of the two.
I understood you say there were 4 phases. Did I misunderstand?
Three phases. The 4 phases is the business administration building.
Okay.
That's where I'd like to get the first 2 done by getting matching from the state, if we could do that.
What do you think the time frame would be?
On the optometry, well, if you were to approve it in January, if we're allowed to bring it to you for approval, we could get started right away. I mean, we're talking about 1.5 years, Larry, something like that.
Yeah, but what's the gap between 1 and 2?
Oh, I don't have an answer for that. You know, at one point when Representative Chris Kelly is out there talking about a potential bond issue, he's always talking about the optometry nursing complex. I don't know why he fixed that as his example. But if we were to get a bond issue passed from the state, who knows? I don't have an answer. And we would certainly be as aggressive as we can with fundraising, but you know, it will be more difficult raising large dollars for this as compared to the business administration building, but we'll certainly give it our best shot. Yeah, I wish I could give you a solid answer on that one. Don't have it. But this can be standalone. It can be standalone because it's located just a walk away from the other building. We're not putting it several miles away. So for all practical purposes, it's almost part of the same complex. It's just across the parking lot from the current optometry structure.
Thank you.
Questions? Other questions? Thank you, Chancellor George. And thank the dean and thank the students for appearing today. We appreciate that. Next information item we have on the Finance Committee agenda is the Efficiencies and Effectiveness Report. And Interim Vice President Tom Richards will present that to us.
Looking around for a student to give my reports, but might be more entertaining. I'm going to go through a couple of information items today that starts to set us up for the new budgeting process that's well underway and will take much of the fiscal year. We'll talk about that, but just wanted to set the stage of all the things that we're facing and that factor into the decisions in the budgeting process. Basically, since can we leave those on? My eyes aren't as good as they were before. Okay, since 1998, the system has systematically collected and reported data on initiatives that resulted in increased effectiveness and efficiency of university operations. The report we're going to go over demonstrates how the university is containing costs and operating more efficiently, both at a macro level as well as a micro level. The results of these efforts have been impressive and demonstrate our commitment to maintain responsible stewardship over university assets and resources. Approaching it from a macro perspective first, to, again, set the stage and just give a big picture view of what we've dealt with. The two major sources of revenue, obviously, for general operations are tuition and fees and state appropriations. The chart that we're looking at up here shows the total of those two together on a full-time equivalent student basis, so revenues per FTE student. since fiscal year 2001, over at the far left-hand side of the chart. As you can see, state appropriations per FTE student have been declining, and at the same time, tuition and fee revenue per student have been increasing. However, if you look across the plane of the graph, you can see that they haven't changed in total that much since back in FY 2001. As an aside, this change in revenue mix illustrates the zero-sum interplay between state appropriations and tuition at public institutions nationally. When state appropriations fall, tuition increases often have to make up the difference. This is clearly not unique to the University of Missouri system. In terms of what does this mean, or how do we put this in perspective, since fiscal year 2001, adjusted for inflation, the combined total funding per FTE student has actually fallen 30%, or $4,800 per FTE student. To put this into perspective, based on total fall 2013 enrollment of roughly 58,000 FTE students, this gap translates into approximately $275 million. Put another way, had our combined revenues been at that green line, which simply reflected inflationary increases since 2001, had they been at the green line instead of where they are today, our revenues this year would have been theoretically $275 million higher. Now, again, is that an exact science? No, but it gives some perspective. Yes, Curator, go ahead.
Tom, let me ask you a question. Is your message to us, is this a good thing because we've learned to operate much more efficiently? Or is this a bad thing because there's a lot of other things we could do if we would have kept in line with inflation?
It's actually both. It's just a factual statement of looking at the revenues and kind of defining the challenge. The good news is we've been able to manage through the challenge, but are there things that we'd like to be doing that we can't do? Absolutely, because we've had to make tough choices, and we're going to talk about some of those.
Tom, as I mentioned to you in our conference call, I think this is a chart that would be very important to get out to the public, to our alums, to legislators, the governor's office, everybody who cares about how we steward our resources here. Because what it shows to me is that we are doing much more with the same amount of money, and less money if you take into account inflation. So inherently, we have been much more efficient in fiscal year 2013 than we were in fiscal year 2001. Not to say that there might not be some additional efficiencies that we can squeeze out, and I think we all would agree there are. But we've squeezed a lot of the waste out of the budget in the last 12 years, according to that chart.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, what we might get from that is, boy, that's really good, keep it up. And on the other hand, we know that there are a number of things that are suffering, faculty salaries being one of the biggest, keeping up with deferred maintenance, and a few others. So, I mean, if we're going to put this chart out, I think what needs to go with it is, sure, this is happening and we're getting this done, but there's a whole lot that's falling by the wayside.
Absolutely, but I guess the point would be the low-hanging fruit of eliminating waste. We've done that, and we've gotten, as we've talked about in past years, we've been cutting into the bone the last several years, and one of the bones that we're cutting into is our faculty salaries, where we're 33 out of 34th on the Mizzou campus, public AAUs. We're low, I know, on the Rolla campus and other campuses. So there's a lot that if we had just received cost of living, inflation increases, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing on maintenance or repair. We would be much more up to speed. We wouldn't be doing what we're doing right now on faculty salaries. And the point I've made in past years is, and we've had this chart up, or not this chart, and Tom, I commended Tom on this chart. We've had similar presentations in the past, and I think the message is not that we have to keep hammering the legislature and the governor to give us the money that they used to give us. We all believe they should, but that's not happening, and we need to keep trying. But what we have to do is hope for the best and plan for the worst, and plan that state appropriations are going to stay roughly where they are. Hopefully we'll get more every year. and plan that our tuition is going to be relatively flat. We have state limitations on how high we can go on tuition increases, and develop alternative revenue sources and continue to look for efficiencies. To me, that's the message. Go ahead, Tom.
Absolutely. But again, just kind of setting the stage, big picture view illustrates the costs that have been taken out of the system. Here's another way to look at it. This is targeting state appropriations in particular over the last roughly 5 years. The blue bar that you can see on the left-hand side is the actual state appropriation that we had received in each year. You can see it's going down. Why did it go down? 2008, 2009 financial crisis hit. Obviously, through no fault of the state of Missouri, we all got wrapped up in the financial crisis that impacted tax revenues. Everyone's budgets were cut. And that's not really the point. The point is more to illustrate just a revenue hole or a revenue gap that was created as this was going on, again, to illustrate from a big picture perspective what it is that we've had to manage through. So the red bar next to the blue shows what the state appropriation would have looked like had it, again, simply increased by inflation, keeping in mind that inflation has been very, very small over these last 5 years, usually less than 2% per year. And the green bar is taking a look at and calculating that cumulative funding gap. So the bottom line, again, this is just another illustration, but had we simply received the same state appropriation adjusted for inflation over the past 5 years, that gap illustrated by the green bar that's cumulative in number is $300 million. Now, our cost structure did not decline during this period of time. What that really illustrates, again, from a big picture perspective, is that we've had to take costs out of the system. Now, roughly of the $300 million, if we want to call that lost revenue, we think about $80 million of that had been replaced with increased enrollment, but that still leaves $220 million in costs that would have had to have been structurally taken out of the system. And the fact that we balance our budget every year illustrates or should suggest that, in fact, we have taken that cost out of the system. So again, just sort of a big picture view. One other perspective, looking at it from an expense side from a different perspective, this graph is showing operating expenses per degree awarded. You can see the peak back in FY 2009 and then the drop in the cost per degree awarded, 5% decline since the peak. The numbers translate into a difference of about $43 million in terms of taking that difference in FY 13 multiplied out by the 16,900 degrees we've awarded. So again, just another way of looking at the fact that we've become more efficient because we've had to. We've had to manage our resources carefully as our revenues have been challenged. Just looking at details, I don't really want to go too much into the details, but we do track things where we can in terms of specific cost cuts and cost reduction efforts, cost management efforts, et cetera. It's difficult because the organization, as you know, is huge. At the count yesterday, we actually have 218 colleges, schools, or divisions across the 4 campuses. And within those 218 entities, there are another 1,100 departments. So stuff is going on all over every day. And what we do know for sure is that every day, each of those roughly 1,100 departments are making tough choices and having to reallocate resources. The things that we can track, again, this is just for fiscal year 13, we can calculate about $47 million in cost management efforts. But I can tell you that's just sort of the tip of the iceberg in terms of the decisions that are made, again, at the micro level, department by department, reallocating and sort of establishing priorities. If you take those annual numbers that we calculate, we presented to the board in the past, this is just sort of a graphical representation of them over the past 5 years. And over that 5-year period, they total about $208 million. We've got details specific to FY13 on workforce reductions that occurred. Again, these are in your materials. I won't go into the exact details. Another big picture perspective, this graph represents the percentage of spending of the operating budget on our core mission. And this is one of the 5 performance measures for our state funding that we've done very well in. And when I talk about core funding, I'm talking about the instruction, research, and public service. So what percentage of our expenditures go to the core? In our case, 75%. Our peer group is 72.5%. And if you do the math roughly, you're looking at $37 million more of our budget dollars going into the core as opposed to administrative overhead. Again, sort of an illustration of the efficiencies from a big picture perspective.
Tom, what's that, Dave, what's that other part spent on that's not on the core? What's that other 25% go for?
Administrative, support services.
That's,
I mean, a
not
multitude of
anything
things.
besides teaching, you're saying?
Everything but teaching, research, service.
Okay, so that's, okay, I got you.
But relative to our peer group, we do extraordinarily well.
Does that include auxiliaries?
I think we're talking in this case in the operating budget for the most part, so the auxiliaries would be outside of that. Another important angle from, again, a big picture perspective, we've managed the institution through these challenges, and not just since the 2008-9 recession, but really back to 2001 with issues that we had in state funding. But it's important to note, and we're all pleased that this has happened. We've managed the finances extraordinarily well. And just as an illustration of that, as you're aware, we recently went out to market and we issued debt in the public markets. And as part of that process, Moody's and S&P both took a very hard look at our finances and looked at our budgets and our performance. And we've been able to maintain over this time period the AA1, AA+ ratings, which really says that despite these challenges, we've done really well. In fact, this quote from the recent S&P report says, historically, the system has effectively managed through operating and capital appropriation cuts, and we consider UM's budgeting to be both conservative and proactive. Moody's, just a quote from the Moody's report, prudent fiscal management with a focus on cost containment enabled the university to continue to produce consistently positive operating results despite declining state appropriations. So from outside objective observers, they're validating the management, the financial management that's taken place over the past decade despite these challenges. So the main point is we're doing the right things, but we're doing them in the right way as well. Facilities needs. Previously we had talked about this in terms of a cost management effort, and we've broken it out, but we still wanted to talk about it. One of the ways, honestly, in which we've helped balance the budget specifically over the past 5 years, but again, really going back the past decade, we've deferred critical repairs and maintenance. And it really came down to a choice between people and buildings, faculty and buildings. We're getting at a point now where that's not as easy of a choice because now our buildings are going to be impacting our faculty and our students based on the deteriorating condition. We have a systematic methodology in place, and we use an outside consultant that literally goes by building on each of the 4 campuses and does a pretty detailed assessment of each facility, and that's updated periodically. And they use very sort of engineering-like methodical calculations to come up with the cost estimates for bringing those buildings up to the appropriate standards. And it's all calculated through the system. Back in FY09, that cumulative backlog was $838 million. The current fiscal year, it's up to $1.3 billion. That continues to grow, partially because we haven't had the funding to reinvest at the level needed to maintain the buildings or to begin to dig ourselves out of the hole. If we were to look at an investment, we'll talk about this in the next presentation, just to get sort of caught up, just to get on a path to get caught up with our needs, we'd really need to be putting another $50 million a year into critical maintenance and repair. And that's just to address the critical needs. That's not talking about new facilities. So again, it's not, I wouldn't brag about this as a cost management effort. It's been a consequence to the choices that we've had to make due to the revenue challenges. And that concludes this part of the discussion. If they're be happy to answer any questions or.
Any questions for Tom on this?
On those critical needs, we're not violating any laws or anything like that, or we're not, I mean, there's no federal regulations that we're violating or anything like that, is there?
No, and that's the that's probably the larger story, and actually I'll talk about, or I was going to make a comment on a slide in the next presentation. Curator Downing and I were talking about this with President Wolf, and Curator Downing had asked for a more in-depth presentation on this particular topic at a future board meeting, kind of dig into the data to see more what it means and how does it translate into. But to answer your question is no. The problem is now most of the dollars that we have are allocated towards sort of emergency issues, things critical that have to be repaired. So what that means is that we're not able to expend the resources on preventative maintenance. And you know what that means, just being a property owner or a homeowner. If you don't fix things on the front end, they're often more expensive to fix on the back end. Okay.
If any other questions, comments on the efficiencies report? Next information item is the fiscal 2015 preliminary tuition fees presentation. Tom?
Okay. Financial and budgetary pressures. Same message as the previous presentation, but just beginning to set the stage for the discussion on tuition. The state appropriations, again, have not kept pace with inflation or the 34% increase in enrollment, and I don't say that as a complaint. I just say it as a statement of fact and a challenge that we've had to manage through. And again, we've been able to do that relatively well. And also, again, just the reminder of this zero-sum game in revenues in public higher education, as state appropriations are challenged, tuition makes up for it. Those are the only two sources of revenue, by and large, in a material sense. Yes, there are other sort of minor revenue streams, but for the most part, it's funded by those two revenue sources. We also know, though, that in our case, we've got caps now on our ability to control our own tuition. So we've got challenges on one of the sources in terms of the ability of the state to fund education, and then somewhat we have constraints on the other primary revenue source, which is Senate Bill 389, which limits increases in tuition for Missouri resident undergraduates to the CPI rate. In addition, of course, to the Senate Bill 389, we've got a real concern, a continuing concern about keeping college access, the access and affordability issues. So in terms of the market demands. We know, therefore, that any proposed tuition increases or increases in supplemental fees or new supplemental fees need to be considered very thoughtful. They need to tie back into the strategic plans of each of the campuses. Consequences, again, this really ties in from the previous slide in terms of the challenges from more of the academic side. Student-faculty ratios are increasing. We know that, have a graph to look at. Challenges to the faculty, again, doing more with less. So it has this overall impact on everything that we do. In terms of the student-faculty ratios, just in particular, this is a graphical representation since the fall of 2002, and you can see the trends that have taken place. Again, we've had to do this. We've had to do more with less as part of managing through some of our revenue challenges. In terms of direct impact on faculty and staff, we know that in some areas, faculty salaries rank near at the bottom of their comparator groups in key areas, again. Staff salaries are significantly below peers in again, key cases. We've got increased pressure on recruiting and retaining faculty and staff for the success and implementation of strategic plans. And then finally, if that weren't enough, benefit costs are increasing at a potentially unsustainable pace. So those are some of the things that we face in terms of setting the stage and thinking about tuition. Here's just going back to critical maintenance and repair needs. This just looks at it from a different perspective. This is still the same $1.3 billion that we talked about, but we look at it in different ways in terms of purposes, again, specific objectives. Deferred maintenance is almost half of it, $625 million of just things that should have been done that we haven't been able to get to because of funding constraints. In terms of the urgency of the repairs, according to the analysis that we have, everything is rated as either critical, which suggests it should be addressed immediately. That latest number was $35 million. Those things are probably getting addressed in some manner, in sort of real time. The next category is urgent, which is $186 million, and that says it should be addressed within 1 year. The necessary chunk, the $836 million, the biggest chunk, ideally would be addressed within 2 to 5 years. This just gives some perspective, again, just putting numbers to the analysis of the issues that we face. And the particular problem with this is that it just doesn't go away. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So we can't, in terms of we've been able to manage through, and Curator Good, your question, is this a good thing or a bad thing? I'd suggest in this case we're reaching a point where we can't sustain the current practice because the problem's going to get bigger, and the bigger it gets, the more expensive it is to kind of dig out. Getting more specific to tuition, just wanted to show again some peer group data to set the stage. On this slide we have the tuition and required fees for the FY 2013, FY 2014. The main point here is that we're well below the peer group, the public doctoral national average. And this is not new information. We've seen this every year. The other thing that we talk about is over the past 5 years, the average annual increase in tuition and fees has been, again, kept under control extraordinarily well in terms of, again, those access and affordability issues. Very interestingly, to put this in perspective against peers, this is a busy graph, but what this is doing, and this is using MU just because we've got probably the best peer data or comparator groups. MU is over the smallest blue and red bars, which really represents the smallest average annual 5-year increase as well as the absolute 5-year increase in required tuition and fees, again, over the past 5 years. We're comparing ourselves to all of our peers in contiguous states. So in terms of maintaining access and affordability, keeping increases in tuition low, we've done an outstanding job versus virtually all of our peers in the entire surrounding area. Again, is that a good or a bad thing? It's both. Just again, different comparator groups. If we look at the average tuition for MU, we can compare against the Big 10, the Big 12, the SEC, the AAU, public and private, and just the AAU public. And again, you get this perspective that from a market-based view, our tuition is extremely competitive in the marketplace. So beginning to think about putting the budgets together, the CPI right now is estimated at about 1.7%. The metric that's defined by the state statute, Senate Bill 389, uses a particular CPI measure, and it's a December measurement date, which means that the actual number we don't know until mid-January. But our best guess in looking at the data trend is about 1.7%. Tuition and fees will be presented to the board at the January meeting for approval. And the default planning scenario, and it's not to say that's the final recommendation, but just by default, in terms of undergraduate tuition, we default at that CPI rate in accordance with Senate Bill 389. And as a reminder, that Senate bill only applies to resident undergraduate tuition and required fees. So in terms, again, of the beginning planning assumptions, the placeholders, this would look at the various tuition categories, resident, non-resident, metro, across the 4 campuses. And you'll see CPI, everything except for MU and Missouri S&T, which are asking for 3% increases in undergraduate non-resident fees, again, for very specific purposes. And then also MU is asking for an increase of 3% and Missouri S&T 6% of graduate non-resident tuition, and again, for very specific purposes. But everything else, the default planning assumption is CPI. These are the proposed professional school rate increases that have been recommended by each of the campuses. Again, I won't read through each of the data points, but for each, for anything above a CPI increase, the campuses are required to submit, the schools to their own campus and the campus to the system, they're required to submit basically sort of a strategic justification for the increase above CPI. So we have all that, we've reviewed all that. Generally very specific reasons, and typically market-based. The two that may seem odd, if you can see them, there's UMKC School of Medicine, there's 2 programs, master's programs, where you'll see non-resident tuition dropping by 20%. That's sort of a strategic pricing decision. They're charging a higher out-of-state tuition currently, but their discounting is very high, and all they want to do is lower the tuition and lower the discounting. So there's maybe more truth in pricing, but they expect that to be a net revenue of no impact. There are two graduate school supplemental fees that have been proposed. I just wanted to review these briefly. Proposed course fee of $30 per credit hour for health management informatics is expected to generate approximately $63,000 annually and will be used to update and expand classroom equipment, software, and subscription purchases for applied and practical learning, as well as to provide professional development support for students. The second proposed, and again, these are new fees, proposed course fee of $40 per credit hour for the Truman School of Public Policy expected to generate approximately $120,000 annually. We used to establish an Office of Career and Alumni Services and to support professional development for graduate students. Any other supplemental fees that would be applicable to graduate school students would be at the CPI rate. We have a list on this slide of a number of proposed supplemental fee changes which would be greater than the rate of inflation. Each one, again, we have a very strategic case and proposal for the increase. And rather than go through these in any level of detail today, the plan that we're operating under is already heavy. We have meetings scheduled, President Wolf and I, and the applicable campus leadership, and maybe school, college, again, leadership in particular on the campuses, to go through each one of these fees in a separate meeting, campus by campus. We've then discussed with Curator Downing, and he's agreed to call a special meeting of the Finance Committee sometime in January before the regular board meeting, so that the Finance Committee would have an opportunity again to do a little bit of a deeper dive into each one of these fee proposals so that we can make sure that each of them gets a sort of fair airing of what the case is and give them an opportunity to present their case to the Finance Committee, which then would make recommendations to the board.
Tom, as part of these supplemental fees, and I know we've been round and round with these in the past, I've always found it helpful, and I'm just one curator talking, but I've always found it helpful when there was support for the supplemental fee that was voted on by the students in the college, like we had today with the College of Optometry, and that was for a different purpose, I understand, for a building. But are any of these schools or colleges getting input from the students in any formal or informal way, or do you know?
I would say that all of them are getting input from students. The question may be whether it's an actual formal vote or sort of town hall meetings or gauging student leadership, but I'd say absolutely all of them are getting student input. That's one of the things that we'll be able to present when we come back with more details on each of these fees as part of the proposal.
Are they getting any input from their parents?
I can't answer that. We have other rates, again, that we would bring in January. First of all, we have activity, facility, health fees, et cetera, that would be applicable to all four of the campuses. For the most part, these are subject to Senate Bill 389, and so the campuses are proposing a CPI rate of increase on those. And then we have combined room and board increases at each of the four campuses. For the most part, I'll just go through them really quickly. MU, the combined room and board rates are proposed to increase by 3.3% overall. Housing rates are proposed to increase by 4% on average, and dining plan rates increase by 2%. Increases at this level are required to support the ongoing strategic facilities renewal program for campus housing. So specific to MU, this is part of a more than 10-year strategic plan to completely renew and replace their entire housing stock. And to make that work, and we've talked about this every year, they needed a little bit extra increase in the housing fees. And they've tried to make up for that on the food cost side to keep the overall increase reasonable. But obviously in exchange for the investment, the students are living in these facilities, and that's one of the things that helps attract people to MU. Missouri S&T housing and dining rates are proposed to increase by 3%. Again, increase beyond CPI is required to provide critical funding for facilities consistent with their strategic plan in terms of housing in particular. UMKC CPI across the board, with one exception, a 3% increase for Oak Place, which is a particular housing unit on the campus that has some special financial requirements in terms of getting that revenue stream up. And that's something that had come before the board, I think, about 2 years ago. And finally, UMSL, just CPI increases that would be proposed. So in terms of putting the budget together and getting some perspective, we talked about the two main drivers, tuition, state appropriations. Number one, increases in state appropriations will continue to be allocated to the campuses based upon the strength of their strategic funding proposals, just as we had done for this current fiscal year. And then in terms of perspective on dollars, a 1% increase in state appropriations comes out to about $4 million. So these are things that we think about as we put the budget together and look at different scenarios. On the tuition side, a 1% increase in tuition would generate overall about $4 million, and you can see the breakdown of sort of undergraduate, resident, non-resident, et cetera, and professional schools is proposed about $1.9 million. Again, from a 1% increase. And going back to the current planning assumption, it would be the Senate Bill 389 limit, which is our estimate of inflation, which would currently be 1.7%. Another component beyond the tuition increases would be net revenue growth from enrollment. Enrollment and change in student mix. The numbers above reflect the current campus assumptions about the discount rates and include when we talk about the net revenues, I just want to make clear that this is net of the discounting. So this is kind of what we get as opposed to the gross amount of the tuition number. Anticipating $5.5 million overall. In terms of the enrollment projections by campus, for the undergraduates ranges from flat to 2% growth expectations, and then flat to 1% for graduate students. So cost drivers, again, these are all the building blocks of the budget as we start off the process. A 1% increase in compensation across the board is $7.8 million. So again, 1% increase in state appropriations is about 4, 1% increase in compensation, almost 8. That would equal roughly a 1.9% increase in tuition alone. In terms of base assumptions for salary planning, the campuses are currently using averages of 0 to 2% for pools. The cost of this, in terms of the benefit cost, which is another issue, the cost of a 1% adjustment in the flat rate is $5.4 million. And again, just to back up a little bit, we've talked about this. Internally, we charge certainly every one of those 1,100 departments for their people. They pay the salary expense directly, and then they're charged what we call the flat rate, which is really what pays for the combined benefit costs across the board. So that percentage of the flat rate, as we've discussed at previous meetings, continues to go up because of cost pressures in the benefit package that we offer. So that flat rate going up by 1% increases expenses $5.4 million across the board. So it's another thing that we have to deal with, and it's very likely that the flat rate will be going up by 1% because of the costs that we have to deal with. So those are the challenges overall. The budget cycle is well underway. The campuses are working to build budgets already. In terms of the analysis, it's already gone in on the revenue side and the tuition. We've discussed over the course of 2 separate presentations the financial challenges that we face and how we've dealt with that. And we've shared our current view and thinking on tuition and fees, as well as try to provide big picture perspectives on the primary revenue and expense drivers. The next step for the board would be to consider final recommendations on tuition and fees at the January 2014 meeting. From there, we'll bring a preliminary budget to the board at the April 2014 meeting for fiscal year 15. And then in June of 2014, we'll ask the board to approve the final budget for fiscal year 2015. And then about a month after that happens, the whole process starts over again.
Tom, are we going to have to ask for a waiver? Are we asking for, the 3% request for like MU or whatever had up there, does that mean we have to ask for a waiver?
No. The only thing where that would be applicable would be tuition falling under Senate Bill 389, which would be Missouri resident undergraduate students. And we are not anticipating that.
Oh, I thought I saw 3% from Missouri University.
It was graduate.
That's just graduate? Okay.
Yeah.
So we would not, yeah.
Go ahead.
We would not be asking for any waivers then? Okay.
Tom, the extent to which we need to have any tuition increase on Missouri undergraduates is at least partly based upon our state appropriations. And in our January meeting, will we have a sense by then of what the state appropriation likely will be? And if not, where I'm really going with this is, what's the latest we could vote on a tuition increase and still make it effective for the next fiscal year? Will we have to do it at the January meeting, or is there a possibility we could delay until we know more about our appropriation?
I think that the sense that we've gotten, and hopefully no one sitting in the back will throw things at me, but we think we could go up until the end of February before making a decision. Anything beyond that starts to put a lot of pressure on the campuses in terms of, again, enrollment, financial aid packages. But if we had to, we think we could go to the end of February.
Thanks. Any other questions for Tom?
I've got a quick one. Tom, when you showed us the slide comparing us to peer groups for tuition, what if we layered in housing costs and fees? How do we compare to peer groups if we layer that in as well? Do the numbers dramatically change?
I don't think that they would. I don't necessarily have that data here. I think in terms of housing costs, each of the campuses, to the extent they have housing, they have to be competitive in their, not just against peers, but in their own markets in terms of alternatives, off-campus housing, things like that. So I think that's something they pay very careful attention to. And then in the case of MU in particular, where there's been very deliberate investment, the product, doing a peer comparison, you'd have to compare the quality of the product also to the cost. But I know that's been an integral part of their overall enrollment growth plan over the past decade as part of, building the overall experience.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Okay, our first action item today in the Finance Committee is a request for approval to employ an architectural firm on the Mizzou Columbia campus for a medical science edition. Tom?
As you're aware, in the last legislative session, we received an additional $10 million annual state appropriation for purposes really of expanding the number of medical school graduates that we're able to put out at MU, and then to extend part of that training experience into the Springfield area in partnership with some of the private entities down there. Work is well underway in making that program become a reality. One of the steps along the way is expanding classroom space on the MU campus for the medical school so that they have the physical space to accommodate additional students. The request that's before the board today is to approve architectural and engineering services for that building addition in the amount of $1.95 million. The total project budget is estimated to be $35 million. We are not bringing forward a funding plan right now. We're just trying to move forward. To be honest, we're trying to fast-track this project as much as we can because of the urgency of really wanting to do and fulfill the intent of the legislature, which is to educate more doctors. So we fast-tracked this as much as possible. We'd like to move forward with approval on the design services, and then we will come back to the board once the funding proposal is in place. We have talked with I think the legislature, I think it's fair to say, in the governor's office in terms of whether or not a component of that $10 million appropriation could be used for debt service on this facility, and the answer is yes. Again, it's part of the specific intent of the legislature that we do this, and this is something that was known. Overall, the expansion is roughly a 75,000 to 85,000 square foot addition. It is an addition to an existing building. They're going to build up, I think, 3 floors on top of a building and then sort of a tower out in front. But the request today is to allow us to move forward on planning and design.
Any questions or discussion?
Tom, do we anticipate building a building in Springfield, or will facilities be provided us there?
They are still working through, I think, the logistics of how that's going to work with our partners down there. I don't know necessarily that we would be building a facility, but hopefully there'd be something done in partnership with two of the entities that are down there.
How much are we expanding the medical school? How many students are we expanding?
We want to increase the current class size is about 96 students. We want to increase that to 128 per year. So it's a pretty sizable increase, and again, kind of drives the space requirements.
The question that Don asks causes me to wonder, are we paying for all of the architectural and engineering costs, but may not be building the building? Are we sharing that with our partners down there? Those initial costs.
Those costs are for the expansion of the academic space on the MU campus.
Okay.
Any other questions? May I have a motion to approve the request to employ the architectural firm as recommended? Second?
Second.
Cindy, please call the roll.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Downey?
Yes.
Curator Ponder?
Aye.
Curator Stewart?
Aye.
Okay. All committee votes in favor.
Well, I guess in Wayne's absence, I am the acting chairman now, so I'm just, I will move the chairman on behalf of the committee to approve this request. Do I have a second?
Second.
Please call the roll.
Curator Bradley?
Yes.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Downey?
Two heads.
Yes.
Curator Good? Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Ponder?
Aye.
Curator Stewart?
Aye.
Okay. You have 8 votes in favor.
Final item on our agenda, action item is Tom wants to review with us our state capital appropriations request, and in particular with respect to the higher education capital fund. Go ahead, Tom.
So otherwise known as the 50-50 match program, MU has proposals that are before the board today for approval. Each of the 3 campuses has previously brought proposals before the board that have been approved to move forward. First of all, to be clear, we are not asking to move forward with building buildings or doing work. We're asking the board's permission to submit appropriation requests to the state for these projects under the terms of the 50-50 match program. If these facilities, these projects were to be funded, they would each need to come back to the board for discussion and approval in terms of an overall plan, just like any facilities project would. So this is simply to submit an appropriations request to the state. The Columbia campus is proposing 4 project submissions under the 50-50 match program. You have the information in your materials. I'll talk high level on these. If you have specific questions, I know there are people from the Columbia campus that could answer detailed questions. Lafferty Hall, as you're probably aware, is one of our top priorities in terms of capital appropriations generally from the Columbia campus with the needs. They have raised roughly $6.1 million in pledges from donors and are asking for a match of that amount, which would give approximately $12.1 million. I think the best way to just sum up this project is there's a lot of work to do in the complex, but they can do discrete pieces. And this $12.1 million would take care of a significant amount of those discrete pieces and would have an immediate impact on undergraduate learning, the undergraduate learning environment in particular. It's not to say that that will take care of the whole building, but it is a unique project that can be accomplished in terms of thinking of it as a phase. Fine and performing arts facilities, campuses received pledges of approximately $2.7 million, and again asking for a match on that for $5.5 million. This is really a larger project and long-time priority of the Columbia campus. Total project cost is estimated at roughly $71 million. Again, for the School of Music, this, for the most part, would allow planning and design to move forward. Teaching winery, $1.5 million in commitments, so a $3 million project in total. This would be a distinct project for the $3 million cost, and again, there are details on that in your materials. And then finally, Applied Learning Center. This is really the School of Business at MU, and it's an addition across the street from the existing facility. Total project cost on that is estimated to be roughly $77.5 million. They've raised so far $10.7 million, so with a state match, they'd have $21.5 million available. They still have funds to raise, obviously, to complete that capital plan, but they're excited about moving forward, and they've got real capacity constraints in terms of the size of the business school, the enrollment, and where their strategic plans suggest that they need to go. So those are the 4 projects together, again, just asking for permission to submit state appropriation requests under the 50/50 match program.
If this money has been raised, this campus match money has all been raised already?
From private donors, pledges.
Yeah, that's not the total cost of each project. That's just the planning, architectural fees.
The campus match column is simply the pledges that we have in hand from private donors today.
Right.
That would be theoretically matched by the state, so the total amount available would be in the total column.
But that wouldn't finish each one of these projects. That would just get the planning done, architecture fees.
Well, I think again in Lafferty Hall, it would be a very distinct phase that could have an immediate impact. The fine and performing arts facilities, I think, would be more of what you're discussing, as well as the Applied Learning Center. Again, the teaching winery is a discrete project that could move forward and get completed.
$3 million.
Tom, if additional donations come in, would these be automatically increased?
We would find a way to increase the request from the state. We'd probably have to ask the board. We'd have to figure out how to logistically do that.
So are the projects driven by our strategic plan or driven by groups that have a particular interest in, not to pick on the teaching winery, but as an example, is that strategic to our ag school or ag engineering, or is it because this family and the Missouri Wine and Grape Board wants to do it, and we're doing it because they've come up with $1.5 million?
I'd like to defer to the Columbia campus on that. In terms, I don't want to get into discussing their strategic priorities, but.
Ron, did you want to field that one?
I hadn't seen that plan earlier.
The College of Agriculture, Food and Natural Resources has for a long time wanted and has been expanding their wine program. And this has been a long-standing project that they've been trying to find a way to find funding for, to create a facility that would enable them to do the research and teaching that they need to do with regard to that program. It has grown quite a bit in the past few years. So yes, it is part of the strategic plan for the school.
So the University of California at Irvine has made a success of that, and Missouri used to be a great wine producer. I'm not speaking against it, I'm just saying, do we, and I'm using that just as an example, but are we bringing forward every time that someone has a match and has a desire, or are we scrutinizing? Are these the only 4 where we've got the money in hand, or have we selected these 4 out of 7 that have been proposed?
I think it's fair to say that these are 4 that we have the money in hand for, where there were specific attempts to raise funds for these projects, and these projects are all directly related to what we'd like to do on campus.
Driven by our development office or driven by this board and our strategic plan?
I think it's fair to say, and Tom's here, he can say something in addition if he wants, but this has been driven by things that we find very strategic. The business school absolutely is an area that we're looking to expand. Likewise with engineering, many of you know we've gone through some renovations in engineering. There are multiple projects, and we can do discrete projects in engineering with each of those amounts that have been raised. Likewise with the Fine Arts Building, which has been a long-standing desire to improve the music program and the other fine arts on campus.
You'll make a fine witness.
But you're right. John, this is the first time I've heard about the winery. school or addition.
But as I understand our vote today, it is not to approve these projects or to move them in a higher priority list on our campus plans than they might otherwise be. That will be a different day. This is simply, we have donor money. We want to ask the state if they'll match it, and then we decide down the road, if the administration recommends any of these projects down the road, whether we want to approve it. Is that correct, Tom, what I just said?
That certainly is correct. But I think probably in the case of a project that has complete funding and literally could go forward, I think that in approving the appropriation request that we would support the project. The difference would be with some of the others that might be done in more phases where there are other funding components that would have to come before the board, possibly issuance of debt.
But it still is going to require a vote, an action
Absolutely.
by the board to approve the project, even if it's fully funded. It still would have to come back to the board for a vote.
Could I ask a question, John, or Curator Phillips? Is your question getting to whether or not there would be any distracting or deviation of funds that might otherwise be going to fulfill what's plainly part of what's become the strategic plan? Is this is any of these matters going to detract? I mean, not that you can't ask your own question, I know that, but is that something that you have in mind?
Sort of. I have questions about the extent to which development and donor intent is aligned with our strategy, and this shouldn't be the first time that we're looking at a teaching winery, and by our silence approving of that. So I think we ought to have more discussion, or that we ought to be satisfied that the university administration is giving thought to this and encouraging development in the areas in which we've laid our strategic plans by campus. And also, I don't mean to complicate the thought, but also there'll be competition between campuses if we simply let the campuses do this and then compete in the legislature. So I'm raising it more of concern at a university level, campus, and donor, so that we're focused on our strategies and not on what somebody wants to give or what some campus wants to promote.
Let me speak to that, Don. And you've heard me say this before. Traditionally, there was one list for capital improvements that the university took to the legislature. And it came up, through the process, each campus with what they had, and would go by the coordinating board of higher education, and then, that list. And for a number of years, there's not been much on that list funded because the legislature hasn't had much money, and then for the last 4 years, they've decided not to pass a bond issue, which would have addressed, that to a great extent. And then, so you have that list, and then the Tim Green bill that passed 3 years ago, called for a 50-50 match, where I think the requirement is the campus would have to go out and raise that money from the outside and donors, and then come to the legislature and we'll try to match it. So that kind of creates another list we're sending to the legislature. And then there's the case like with the optometry school, where you're raising the money on campus through fees, but it's not outside money. So I don't think that qualifies for the Tim Green bill, does it, Steve?
No, it has to be private.
Yeah. So then you have kind of three lists, or buildings in three different situations pretty much 3 lists, at least 2 different lists, going to the legislature. So where's the highest priority? The highest priority is supposed to be on that list that's been created through the traditional process. But then when money comes along, then that helps move something. And I don't think, John, it's people that are bringing money to the campus and say, hey, build this building. I mean, it's not that that probably hasn't happened, but like in the case of the business school here, the business school people went out through their alumni and so forth and raised a bunch of money from individuals and corporations. A big hunk of it came from Anheuser-Busch, but it's not like Anheuser-Busch said, we want you to build a business building, and went out and recruited them. So that's kind of the big picture of what this capital improvement looks like. And with a legislature that's, you know, doesn't have any long experience of time, they're going to be confused to some extent, what do you really want, and have no memory of what's really been in line for a long time and what hasn't. So it's, you know, it's a problem, and it's a problem what kind of message, you know, we want to take to the legislature and other higher education entities. So I don't know if that helps or hurts,
and
but
Wayne,
that's
those,
kind of the picture as I see it.
Wayne, those lists don't match up, you're saying. Those two lists do not match up.
Different buildings on different lists, and
nor will they ever.
Yeah.
If we lived in a perfect world, they would, but they will never match up. There will always be differences based on donor intent and the prioritization. We made it clear to the legislature, and it wasn't funded, so maybe let's try this. Make it fuzzy and get some projects funded. I don't know, but it is complex. You perfectly summarized it. We have 3 different lists.
Yeah, and it's better if you had one list, but you really can't under the way the rules are. And if they never go to a bond issue, I mean, the only way you're going to make a dent in this big backlog of both needs for new buildings and needs for major renovation and major maintenance is to get a bond issue. And right now, that bond issue, to do that would be gigantic.
Well, and, you know, obviously we all know one countervailing point, and I totally agree with what you said, Lane. You put it as none of us could because you have the history and the knowledge. But on the other hand, we do have donors. We don't want to discourage donors from providing substantial funds to help us out, particularly now. So, you know, I agree that the buildings we build need to be strategic. Completely agree with that. And the campus, each campus needs to believe they're strategic or they shouldn't be presented to us. But you know, the other countervailing consideration to the countervailing consideration is, so let's say the legislature provides 50-50 matching to one or more of these projects. And then we get to the point where Tom tells us that we're at our limit to keep our credit rating. And we decide as a board that we don't want to lower our credit rating by issuing more debt at that particular point in time. So where does this project fall in the priority with other projects that have already been put on our campus strategic plans, maybe a higher priority?
So let me just comment on that. These projects, we're not approving any debt on this. No. These are just cash. We come up with donations. And by the way, just the fact that we have this 50-50 program out there, we've gotten more interest from donors about the funding of this because of the possibility of a 50-50 match. They are calling their legislators and putting pressure on them. So this is not a bad thing because they are trying to do as much as they possibly can to get a big bonding issue or funding for 50-50 matches. So I think more power to MU and the rest of the campuses for continuing to push this as hard as we possibly can. And let's see if we can get the legislator to fund these.
Well, it isn't a free building. You got $500,000 or $1.5 million that's been gathered, but $1.5 million comes from the legislature. And when you, let's say they approve it, now you have a new 2-story building you have to maintain. You're growing the campus, and aren't we going to hear from Jeff City, well, we gave you that building, when what we really need is improvements or renovation of the engineering building? Or I would suggest instead of $10 million for e-learning, maybe it should be $11.5 million and try to get those donors to support our strategic plans as opposed to just saying yes because somebody wants to put up some money.
Well, your original question is perfectly correct, is everything that we should do should relate back to the strategic plan. And your question on this and any other project that gets put in front of the board is how does this relate to our priorities as defined by our strategic plan?
And the other thing...
And Dean's going to tell how he's going to go to Jeff City and support this.
Well, what I'm going to do is clarify what I said earlier. All of the projects that we're requesting the 50-50 match for are on our strategic plan. Last June of 2012, we submitted to the board our campus plan, our campus capital plan, which included as the first two items on the list the College of Engineering, Laffrey Hall, renovation, reconstruction, and the School of Music facility, and also on there the business school and a facility called, now I'll get my glasses in order here, a regional food and wine complex estimated at $20 million, all of which was listed as private funds. What this is a discrete portion of that project, and it can be built as a standalone operation. So it was part of a much larger strategic plan that we have for that facility.
And I think when the list was first proposed, I think I raised the same question about are we going to have competition because of people that want to donate. So I continue to raise the question.
Another part of it is often the highest priority is to renovate some very important building, and it's a lot harder to raise money to renovate a building than there is to build a new one. So that's kind of skews your priority list too.
Discussion?
Well, wine is my poison of choice. I just want to...
Discussion, comment, questions? May I have a motion to approve the administration's request to submit these projects at the funding levels indicated for the 50-50 match program set up by the state? Do I have a second?
Second.
Please call the roll, Cindy.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Downey?
Yes.
Curator Ponder?
Aye.
Curator Stewart?
Aye.
Okay, all committee votes in favor.
Mr. Chairman, I so move on behalf of the committee.
Second for the motion? Any further discussion? Call the roll, please.
Curator Bradley?
Yes.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Downey?
Yes.
Curator Good?
Aye.
Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Ponder?
Aye.
Curator Stewart?
Aye.
Okay, all votes in favor.
May I have a motion to adjourn our committee meeting?
That's it.
Please call the roll, Cindy.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Downey?
Yes.
Curator Ponder?
Aye.
Curator Stewart?
Aye.
All votes in favor.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the business of the Finance Committee.
Thank you. Next meeting is, our next committee meeting is the Compensation Committee.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have one action item, and it is a clarification of a previous language that we adopted. The language is attached, and Betsy is here if anyone has any questions. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to approve it.
Chairman, why don't you or Betsy give us a quick...
I'm here.
Yeah, just give us a quick overview of what we're doing here.
I can do this very briefly. The university has 3 voluntary retirement savings programs. They're 401A, 403B, and 457. These are primarily vehicles for employees to put additional money aside for retirements on a voluntary basis. However, we do have the ability under IRS regulations to allow for university contributions in limited circumstances. And you all approved something similar to this on the 401A plan at your last meeting, and we're asking you to do that again for the 403B plan. One of the changes that we had to make on these plans is to add an appendix and actually list the individuals that receive these university contributions, and that's what you have before you, is a list that includes one individual.
Any questions or any discussion?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Cindy?
Curator Bradley?
Yes.
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Downing?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Ponder? You have 4 committee votes in favor.
Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the committee, I would move adoption by the full board.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Denise, call the roll, please.
Curator Bradley?
Yes.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Downing?
Yes.
Curator Good?
Aye.
Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Ponder? Curator Stewart?
Aye.
Okay. You have 8 votes in favor.
Motion carries. Next order of business is the Audit Committee. Em?
Mr. Chairman, at the September meeting, Interim Vice President Richards presented the financial status report based on the audited financial statements of the university, and Susan Eichhoff with KPMG will present the FY 2013 External Auditors Report.
Good afternoon. We appreciate the opportunity to discuss with you the results of the financial statement audit. We're still working on some of the other deliverables for you that conclude overall at the end of March, but wanted to take an opportunity to discuss the results of the June 30th financial statements. We have some required communications to go over with you, as you know, that are required by various standards. We're going to start on slide 3, please. As your independent external auditors, we are responsible for forming and expressing opinions about whether the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects in conformity with U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. We do have a responsibility to perform our audits in accordance with all of the applicable professional standards. As we carry out our responsibility to issue an opinion on the financial statements, we do plan and perform the audit to obtain what's referred to as reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements are free of material misstatement, whether caused by error or fraud. We are to obtain reasonable, not absolute, assurance that material misstatements are detected, but we have no responsibility to find misstatements that are not material to the financial statements. We do consider internal control for the purposes of determining what specific substantive procedures to perform over the university's transactions, but not for the purpose of expressing an opinion on internal control. And so therefore we do not express an opinion on the effectiveness of the university's internal control. We also have a responsibility to communicate significant matters related to the financial statement audit that are, in our judgment, significant and should be reported to you as the audit committee. On slide 4, the significant accounting policies used are described in the notes to the financial statements. We did note one transaction that we wanted to bring to your attention that was both significant and unusual. During fiscal year 2013, the university did bring on the Missouri Renewable Energy Corporation as a blended component unit within the financial statements. We noted no other transactions, though, that were entered into by the university that were both significant and unusual that we needed to point out to you. Everything else occurred in the normal processes of the university. We do discuss with management our judgments about the quality and just not the acceptability of the accounting principles as they are applied in the financial statements. They generally include matters about the consistency of accounting policies and their application, their understandability, and their completeness. On slide 5, the preparation of the financial statements requires management to make a number of estimates and assumptions. At the date of the financial statements, we have listed for you in our presentation some of the more significant accounting estimates, being the allowance for uncollectible accounts for pledges and notes receivable, Management records investments and interest swap agreements at their estimated fair value. They record estimated liability for workers' comp, general liability, health claims, and medical malpractice claims incurred but not paid. There are also significant estimates involved in the recording of the actuarial determined percentages for retirement and other post-employment benefits. And then finally, an estimate for contractual allowances and third-party settlements. We do evaluate the key factors and assumptions used to develop the estimates, and we determine whether, taken as a whole, we believe that they are reasonable. We did not have any issues with the significant estimates by management. On slide 6, as it relates to the university, we did have one uncorrected financial statement adjustment. We did receive representation from management that that adjustment was not material to the financial statements, and we agreed with that. This was relative to a fair market value adjustment relative to the general pool. What occurs is that the university management records balances as of March 31st just due to the lag in some of the reporting that they obtain, and there was an amount as it related to June 30th market values that was greater than what we call a de minimis threshold. It wasn't material, and so management decided not to post it, and of course we were fine with that and were able to issue an unqualified opinion. As it relates to the healthcare individual standalone financial statements, everything was corrected in those financial statements that was found. On slide 7, there were no disagreements with management that, if not satisfactorily resolved, would have resulted in a modification of our auditor's report. To the best of our knowledge, management has not consulted with or obtained opinions from other independent accountants because they didn't like the information that we provided them. We do generally discuss a variety of matters, including accounting principles and auditing standards, but these discussions, we believe, occurred in the normal course of the business. We do hereby confirm that as of June 30th and as of today, we are independent accountants as it relates to the university under all professional and regulatory standards. And we did receive the full cooperation from management in performing our audits. As you recall, under current auditing standards, we are required to provide to you various disclosures that are material as far as they relate to material written communications between us and management. And so attached to all of our materials, you'll find our various engagement letters, the management representation letters, and then our internal control opinions as they relate to government auditing standards. On slide 8, I know that Tom reported to you in September based upon the draft financial statements, all the significant fluctuations and analysis. We were able to issue an unqualified opinion on October 10th on those financial statements for both the university and the standalone MU Healthcare. The scope and procedures for both the university and healthcare were consistent with the plan that we presented to you on April 11th at the Board of Curators meeting. As I mentioned, we did issue our independent auditor's report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance and other matters based on our audit performed in accordance with government auditing standards, and there were no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses that we need to report to you. On slide 8, as far as it relates to our other deliverables, we do issue the financial statements of the Capital Region Medical Center. That board meeting actually occurred last night, and we completed our required communications with that separate board. We are in the process of performing procedures as they relate to the NCAA Intercollegiate Athletics for Columbia and Kansas City. Those two reports are due to be filed on January 15th, and we're running actually ahead of schedule on those procedures. And then the OMB Circular A133 single audit, we're in the process of performing procedures right now over the research and development cluster, have primarily completed our procedures on student financial aid, and are working our way through the rest of the major programs, and will be in a position to issue that report and file it with the Federal Clearinghouse by the deadline of March 31st. We were involved in the recent Systems Facilities Revenue Bond Fund issuances and did issue our consent on both the preliminary official statement and the official statement recently. And then we also issued our independent auditor's consent for the inclusion of our report relative to the commercial paper issuance. And then lastly, on slide 10, we do have just some informative information. As you know, KPMG has an Audit Committee Institute that the entire Board of Curators is welcome to use from a resource perspective. And we have certain upcoming events and then just our websites as it relates to any resource information that you would need as you think about best practices and such as it relates to your audit committee. Those are my prepared remarks for our required communications, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have relative to the external audit.
Questions?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Next, Hal Williamson will provide us with an update on the risk management structure for MU Healthcare.
Thank you, and good afternoon. When I visited with you in September, I told you that I'd be back in November to give you an update about our risk assessment and what progress we've made. And I know that since that time, you all have been waiting so much that you can hardly stand it. So I probably wouldn't need to say to you, but I will, that this is of a lot of importance. Healthcare over the last 5 years and certainly out into the next 10 has substantial and increasing risks. There are legal risks, there are compliance risks. We are a highly regulated industry, and there are financial impacts based on the future of healthcare and how healthcare will be financed in the future. Recognizing this and also working with Mr. Richards' office, we determined that we probably were underfunding the amount of auditing done by PwC, the internal audit, compared to benchmarks. And our goal, starting last spring, was to really create a comprehensive strategy to identify and to mitigate risk that we might have. So starting in May or June, our corporate compliance office convened a group of stakeholders. Actually, I convened a group of stakeholders, and we decided that we needed to make a change in direction about the way we do things, and we probably needed to provide substantial more scrutiny, as I mentioned in that first slide. So we conducted interviews of 64 different leaders in the health system and staff. We also reviewed tracer audits, which is a technique for looking for risk within a health system. We looked at the Office of Inspector General's focus areas over the last 3 or 4 years. We looked at the PricewaterhouseCoopers audits that had been done and our responses to them, and we reviewed a lot of medical literature, which there is these days, about risk and risk mitigation in healthcare. So we formulated in August and September a plan, which is what I'm going to be telling you about. So the principles, a principle of the strategy was to increase the PwC audits to a total of about 450,000, and that will be starting this next year. We expanded both the depth and the talent in our Office of Corporate Compliance, and our CFO estimates that that's about $1.1 million a year in costs. We created, in my opinion, perhaps most importantly, we created an executive-level oversight committee, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. We decided that we really needed to understand and leverage the unique strengths of our Office of Corporate Compliance, which is embedded in our organization and knows the organization very well, and the skill set and the objectivity of PricewaterhouseCoopers. We decided that we would also create a working group separate from the executive group, which would provide for ongoing communication amongst those parties. And we decided we would provide routine feedback to this group, that is, if you agree that you want it, on an annual basis. So more specifically, we created a committee, which we call the MUHSIACC. Those are the kind of committees that we make. That's the Missouri University Health System, and we are it's an internal audit compliance committee. So the goal of that committee, the job of that committee, will be to approve annually the risk assessment done jointly by PwC and our Office of Corporate Compliance. Will be to approve the compliance plan and coordinate with PwC our audits. And we'll also review the Office of Corporate Compliance reviews for the previous time period. We'll provide input to PwC during our annual risk assessment. As you know, PwC is an independent agent, so we provide input. We don't tell them what to do. And we also will receive regular updates on the reviews and audits that are performed by our Office of Corporate Compliance. We'll review the PwC audit findings and ensure that our management responses are fitting. The chair of that group will give a report to this group annually, and that group's going to meet quarterly. So the members, I don't know how important this is to you, but I'll just say it's a very high-level group that involves myself, Tom Richards. It will be chaired by the CFO of our health system, and we'll have 2 to 4 other members appointed by me, probably the dean and the CEO of the health system. Attending those meetings regularly as ex officio members will be a representative or more from PwC, the chief compliance officer from internally at the MUHS, the system internal audit liaison from Mr. Richards' office, a representative from the Office of General Counsel, and the controller from MUHC. So that's the group that will be performing these quarterly reviews. PricewaterhouseCoopers has selected these audits for you to know for 2004. There are 6 of them. There are 5 that we're confident can be done. 6 of them will be done depending on how far the budget stretches. And in addition to this, by the way, we participate in system-wide audits that are done by PwC on an annual basis. There are 2 other committees that that you may or may not wish to know about, but the first one is more of a work group. That's a non-executive group that will try to ensure as much as we can that the people internally that are working in our Office of Corporate Compliance and the PwC auditors are on the same page when that's appropriate. And then the Internal Audit Steering Committee is actually a University of Missouri wide, and we'll have a representative from our MUHS committee on that also. So that's, in a nutshell, what we plan to do. I think it's a very good plan. I think that it will that it mitigates risk. I think it takes advantage of the strengths of our corporate compliance office and also the strengths and the objectivity of PricewaterhouseCoopers. So any questions for me? Yes, sir.
What's the main emphasis of the Pricewaterhouse audit? Is it compliance or regulatory or financial?
I would say
Or all of the above?
I'd say all the above. Let's say I skip by it. So here's some examples of the 6 things that PricewaterhouseCoopers select. You understand, it's important to understand that they need to be, they I believe, take into account where we think the risks are. But as an independent agency, they are obliged to be sure that they're auditing the things that they think are important. So these are issues in general that some of them are financial, and some of them are legal, and some of them are both.
Is that an annual spend for Pricewaterhouse that we're talking about? When you said we increased the amount of money that we're going to use Pricewaterhouse for or with, is that an annual spend or is that a one-time cost to get the program up and running?
The $450,000 would be the 2014 spend, and we'll get back together for the 2015 spend next summer. It's a lot. It's a big job. Tom, did you have any comments about that? No? JT? No?
Other questions?
Money well spent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. We need a resolution of the audit committee to go into executive session.
So moved. Second.
Call roll, please.
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Downey?
Yes.
Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
And Curator Stewart?
Aye.
Okay. All votes in favor.
Okay, we are ready, I believe, to move to executive session, and we will, I think we'll try to get as much done as we can today. Agenda for the executive session.
Chairman, will we do audit first, or will we go back to comp and HR?
I think we'll go, the audit people ready to leave after they present this, or we probably ought to do them first, and then we can go back and continue with your committee and then go to the other orders of business.
So what do you say, are we coming back in here?